agent4@gmail. I'm gonna agent
24 at Gmail.
agent4@gmail. I'm gonna at gmail. I'm gonna agent
24 at Gmail.
agent.
I'm gonna start it.
24 at Gmail. 24 at
Somebody has
Jill,
to.
I'm gonna
somebody
mute
in
you,
the
Jill.
background. Yeah, mute Nidal, please.
It was Jill. It was coming through Jill. So, but I'm gonna start now.
Yes. Start what? Live?
Webinar,
Yeah, the webinar.
Okay.
Okay, just to be clear, I'll advance the slides. Repeat your host.
Yeah.
Is Marie on?
No, she didn't accept. She's on, but she wasn't able to be. I'll be muting too.
Okay.
All right, we're live. All right, we're live, everyone.
Nidal, you're on mute.
Can you send me the background, please?
We're live, by the way.
Okay, that's fine.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we hear you loud and clear, Mark.
Okay, great. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Hi, Mark. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Dr. Finkelstein, how are you? Thank you for
Very
joining.
good.
I'm fine, thank you. I'm not sure who's speaking to me, so if you can identify yourself.
Yes, I'm Nidal Jabor. I'm a doctor from Doctors
Finkelstein,
Against.
how are you? Dr.
Very good.
Finkelstein, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you all.
Is there an echo, guys? I mean, there's a little problem.
No, it's fine.
It's fine? Okay.
Should I mute myself? I have a lot of background noise here.
Thanks, Mimi. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead and mute yourself, and we'll wait 5 minutes to have more people join, then we'll start this session. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Maisa, sorry to bother you again. I need that. How to use it as a background.
I'm sending you a text Nidal right now.
Okay, thank you.
I think we can start Nidal. Dr. Jabbour. You're muted, Nidal.
Okay, yeah, I'm good. Thank you. So yeah, let's go ahead and start. Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening for those in Gaza. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this urgent and timely webinar hosted by Doctors Against Genocide. My name is Dr. Nidal Jabbour. I'm the co-founder of Doctors Against Genocide. I'm joined here by Dr. Karama Hawash, who's also the other co-founder of Doctors Against Genocide, and our team and a group of our supporters and good list of panelists who are sharing our webinar today. We come together at a moment when the sanctity of healthcare, the rights of medical professionals, and the lives of countless civilians are under relentless attack in Gaza. We aim to shed light on the catastrophic situation unfolding on the ground, to amplify the voices of those directly impacted, and discuss tangible actions we can take to uphold justice, human rights, and medical neutrality. We are honored to be joined by a distinguished panel of doctors, activists, legal scholars, and advocates who will address critical questions about international law, the responsibility to protect, and how we can push for meaningful political and institutional change to confront genocide. Our conversation is grounded in the lived experiences of doctors currently working in Gaza, those who have recently returned, and those who are preparing for future missions. How to save the doctors. We will hear firsthand accounts of the conditions on the ground, the obstacles healthcare workers face, and the ways the medical infrastructure is being systematically targeted. We are horrified and devastated by the reports of the invasion and destruction of Kamal Udwan Hospital, the illegal abduction of the director, Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya, along with his colleagues, and the tragic displacement of its patients. It is reported that over 240 individuals have been abducted and are currently enduring unimaginable conditions, including torture. Healthcare facilities and workers are protected under international humanitarian law, and any attack against them constitutes a grave violation of these laws. We demand the immediate release of all abducted medical professionals and patients, and an end to the targeting of hospitals and healthcare infrastructure. The safety of medical personnel and their patients must be guaranteed, and those responsible for these atrocities must be held accountable. We stand in unwavering solidarity with our colleagues and the people they serve, especially with our colleague and friend, Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya. Dr. Hawash?
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Jbour. So we welcome everyone. We are focused most and foremost on the release of Dr. Abu Safiya as soon as possible. We have gathered together here very strong voices in media, in politics, in medicine, in international law, and we want to get a way to release him as soon as possible. So welcome, everyone. The webinar is going to be recorded, and it is live streamed on YouTube and LinkedIn, and I think Instagram, and there are some of our partners who are also streaming it. Just to let you know, we want this to be streamed as far as possible, because this is our response to the arrest, to the incarceration of our colleagues in Gaza. It is our response to what is happening in to the hospitals and the healthcare. We have Dr. Mimi Sayed right now in Gaza, who is joining us right now from there. She just told me that they have a mass casualty situation in Gaza, and we will let her speak first, if that's okay for everyone. And before we get to you, Mimi, I just want to say that we will have our speakers include Medea Benjamin. She's right here. Medea is our friend and our mentor. She has been an advocate for decades, and she will join us to reflect on this past 15 months of advocacy for ceasefire and ending the genocide in Gaza. We have Dr. Jill Stein. Dr. Jill Stein is the presidential candidate, and she is in the Green Party. She's also a member at Doctors Against Genocide and a close friend, and we are honored to have her with us today. We are expecting to have Ms. Noura Riqat, who is an attorney, an expert in international and domestic law. And we have Dr. Mark Perlmutter. Dr. Mark Perlmutter is here. Welcome, Mark. He will share firsthand accounts of hospitals, and we are hoping that he will address the allegations of militant operations in the accusation of that in the hospitals. Welcome, Noura Riqat. She is actually here. I have not seen her. We have Dr. Norman Finkelstein. He is a political scientist, a scholar, and an author, and he is best known for his work on the Israeli-Palestinian situation and on the politics of the Holocaust. We have Josephine Gelbo, and Josephine is really the engine behind what happened today. She put together our speakers, and she invited many of her colleagues, especially in the media. Thank you so much, Josephine. Josephine is a veteran, and she quit her job in protest about the genocide in Gaza, and she will talk to us about how we can make a difference in the new coming administration. I think we also have Dr. Razan Nahas, who is our colleague, our member from Doctors Against Genocide. She just came back from Gaza, and she will talk to us about her experience there. We have Dr. Yiping. Dr. Yiping is an activist doctor, a family practice physician, who was also discriminated against, harassed, fired from his job, reinstated, but he still quit his job in protest against Gaza, against the genocide in Gaza. And we have Dr. Farasheen Salavani and Dr. Mohammed Kuzays, two members of Doctors Against Genocide who are actually preparing to go to Gaza. I would like to invite Dr. Mimi Saeed, our Sayed, considering her situation and her needs as a medical doctor in Gaza. Please introduce yourself, Mimi, and tell us where you are and anything you want to share with us. We would like to limit the speaker's time at the beginning to 5 minutes because we have many speakers and we want to have a discussion with questions and answers afterwards. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm Dr. Mimi Sayed. I'm from the U.S. Emergency Medicine. This is my second medical mission to Gaza. I'm here this time at Al-Aqsa in central Gaza. Before I was at Nasser. The situation has gotten much worse. I'm still seeing the same type of injuries in children, disproportionately children and women. We're treating mostly civilians. I have not seen a single military personnel or anything as such with munition on them or anything like that. Not in August, not now. We just had a mass casualty incident. We had a 29-year-old female with a quadcopter shot to the head. This is the same type of injuries that I saw in August with small children, an 8-year-old with a sniper shot to the abdomen, a bullet in the abdomen that's retained. I mean, these are the type of injuries that we're seeing. Malnutrition is sky high. Water contamination is unbearable. There's E. coli and high salt content in the water. We're seeing babies die of simple just diarrhea. It's so preventable and unnecessary. We don't have simple things like a pump for insulin, and a person is dying from DKA. A child is dying from DKA because there's no insulin that can be given with a pump. So, they're either overdosed, underdosed. They go back home in filthy living conditions, and this is just day in and day out. It's become a normal thing now, and it needs to stop.
Thank you so much, Mimi. We got a message from Dr. Abu Safia's family, actually. And if you all allow me, I would like to say it in Arabic and then translate it. So this is a رسالة من عائلة الدكتور حسام أبو صفية. نحن عائلة الدكتور حسام أبو صفية لا يخفى على الجميع ما قام به الدكتور منذ بداية الحرب من جهد كبير لإسناد المنظومة الصحية الوحيدة من أجل سكان شمال غزة، أهلكم وأصحابكم وأقاربكم، وآخرها كانت بعد العملية العسكرية على شمال غزة بعد حصار دام 84 يوما. واجهوا أصعب المحن والظروف والجوع والقهر والقصف والتهديدات من أجل المرضى، وفقد فلذة كبده ابننا إبراهيم، وأيضا تمت إصابته إصابة بالغة، ومع العلم بأن الوالد ما زال متأثر بإصابته حتى اللحظة. لا نعلم ما هو مصير والدي، ونرجو منكم التحرك والضغط الإعلامي والمناشدات والتقارير الإخبارية حتى نعمل على الضغط على الاحتلال من أجل الإفراج عنه بالقريب العاجل. والدي يعاني الآن من البرد القاسي، وجميعكم سمع شهود العيان المفرج عنهم ما قاموا به من إجبار والدي على خلع ملابسه والكوت الطبي واستخدامه كدرع بشري لهم. نرجو من كل ضمير حي ومن جميع المنظمات والمؤسسات الدولية التحرك. I'll say it in English. We, the family of Dr. Abu Safia, are aware of the great efforts that he made since the beginning of the war to support the only health system for the residents of North Gaza. Your family your friends and your relatives, and the last of which after the military operation on northern Gaza for 84 days. Dr. Abu Safiya and his colleagues faced the most difficult ordeals, the most difficult conditions, hunger, oppression, bombing, and threats for the sake of, and he endured all that for the sake of his patients. He lost his beloved son, who was killed by the IDF, our son Ibrahim. Dr. Abu Safiya was also seriously injured. We know that our father is still affected by his injury to this moment. We do not know what his fate is. We ask all of you to take action, to put as much media pressure as possible, to appeal to everyone who can help, spread news reports, pressure the occupation to release Dr. Abu Safiya soon. Our father right now is suffering from the severe cold, and all you heard from eyewitnesses who were released confirm that he was forced to take off his clothes, his medical coat, and he was used as a medical shield for them. We ask every living conscious and all international organizations and institutions to take action. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing this message, Karama. We also have our friends and colleagues from Al-Auda Hospital in northern Gaza. They will be joining us soon. I'm not sure if they are already there or not. We're gonna hear live testimony from them on the situation there. We're also being joined by the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Right to Health, Dr. Tlaring Mofo King. Thank you for being with us. If you wanna join us, please, and if you have anything to share about what the United Nations has to say on the unfolding situation, and what do you recommend for us to do to support this mission to free our colleagues and to ensure their safety. Dr. Mofo King, are you there?
Yes, I am here. Good evening from Johannesburg. Thank you for creating the space and for allowing me just to share a few messages. Firstly, of complete and unwavering solidarity from myself, but also the mandate which I currently hold, which is the mandate on the right of everyone to the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. And since October the 7th, when we have seen the latest of many escalations over many decades, my mandate has been receiving information as well as some allegations of human rights abuses in the area of course, Gaza, but we also know northern Gaza as well. We also know of Lebanon recently, and have also dealt with individual cases of healthcare workers who have been arrested, detained, and this, of course, has been demonstrating a pattern of arrests and attacks on duty, specifically medical personnel, being forced to evacuate hospitals and immediately being arrested, or their families being targeted if they defy those orders. Some of our own colleagues have been dying under those circumstances of detention, some of them, their bodies showing signs of torture. And since this latest escalation, I've been in communication with the member state of Israel, of course, talking about the violations related to the lack of protection of medical personnel under international humanitarian law and international human rights law. And the scale of the destruction has been immeasurable. And it's important to also put into light the fact that we actually haven't really truly quantified the level of trauma and horror that has really been going on. We are yet, as a human experience, have developed even the kind of matrix to measure the kind of evil and the complete destruction of human life in terms of the scale and how fast it has been. And it's through, you know, those experiences that I carry myself of being a medical doctor, but also being a childhood survivor of South Africa's apartheid, that I know all too well and very viscerally the impact of colonization, but imperialist violence And so, despite all of the international calls and the demands for an immediate ceasefire, this shameful genocide has continued by Israel. And it's also Israel's allies, of course, in Europe and in America, that continue with the despicable display of global solidarity in a way that I don't think we could have ever imagined. And the way in which Israel, as an occupying regime, is being supported in billions of dollars and weapons and political and diplomatic cover from accountability is something that continues to worry me and many of my own colleagues. And I know with the ICJ and the declarations that they had made at the time with the case of South Africa versus Israel, it's important that we continue to demand for an immediate ceasefire. We continue to be unwavering in that demand for boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And for all of the people everywhere in the world who are brutalized and exploited and colonized and basically undergoing genocidal attack in real time for the world to view, I'm very ashamed and that the world has failed all of you as people, as humanity, and many of you as my own colleagues. And I hope that the report I'll be doing for the General Assembly next year in 2025 and the Human Rights Council in June of 2025 will shed some light in why it is important to recognize healthcare workers as human rights defenders, as key people to the protection, but also to the realization of the right to health. And in some way, I hope that report will also give us a different way of connecting with each other and humanizing each other as people, despite and in spite of this colonial imperialist trauma that is currently what is keeping us, all of us, working so tirelessly. And I hope that that particular report will take us a step further in how, firstly, this genocide is incompatible with the realization of the right to health, but what are the responsibilities, what can we do to really get justice? And for me, reparative justice has to really look very different in terms of approach and solidarity. And it is quite an important step for me as one of the many ways that my mandate can support and contribute. I continue to communicate with Israel as a member state of the UN, even though they do not respond. And I think part of their strategy is to just ignore any human rights. And I'll continue, and very soon we'll be releasing a press statement on the latest developments that have currently occurred in the last few days in Gaza as well. So colleagues, from me and my mandate, you have unwavering support and solidarity, as little, and I know it doesn't really mean much unless we can stop the bombs and stop the genocide. And you have my commitment to continue to do that with the methods that I have in my power. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mofoking, for being here. Thank you for your strong and clear message. We will thank you for sharing it with us too. We will be back with you for some follow-up questions about what else can we do to help our colleagues there. I want to go now directly to Gaza with our colleague, Dr. Rafat Al-Majdalawi from Al-Auda Hospital. He's the director of Al-Auda Hospital. He's joining us live from Gaza now. Unfortunately, we cannot get Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya, who was scheduled to be with us now, because he's being abducted and being tortured as we speak now. And we are really worried about his health and about his safety. We are worried that he will face the same fate that our colleague, Dr. Al-Borsh faced a few months back when he was tortured and raped in prison and eventually murdered. That's why this call is very urgent, and we really need to mobilize and brainstorm every method, every procedure we have to ensure the safety and the freedom of Dr. Hussam and his colleagues. Dr. Rafat, so Dr. Rafat is going to be speaking in Arabic, and I'll be translating to you guys. دكتور رافت كيف حالك؟ Thank you for joining us من غزة. دكتور رافت تفضل احكي لنا tell us what is the situation now at Al-Auda Hospital, Kamal Udwan Hospital, and the Rantisi Hospital. And do you have any updates on the status and the fate of Dr. Kamal Adwan, his colleagues, and their patients? تفضل دكتور رأفت، أهلا وسهلا.
طيب يعطيكم العافية، وأنا سعيد مرة تانية أن أكون معاكم. يعني الواقع في شمال غزة عمال يزداد سوءا يوما بعد يوم. بالطبع كما علمتم وكما نشرت بعض وكالات الأنباء أن قوات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي حاصرت مستشفى كمال عدوان ودمرت جزء كبير من أقسامه ومرافقه، وأحرقت بعض أقسامه الأخرى، وقامت بطرد النازحين المجاورين في السكن للمستشفى إلى باتجاه غزة، واعتقلت البعض الآخر من المرضى والنازحين الموجودين في المستشفى، وأخرجت الطواقم الطبية باتجاه مستشفى الأندونيسي، ومن ثم تم توجيهها إلى مدينة غزة. والمعلومات أنها اعتقلت الدكتور، لأنه اليوم نشر تقرير رسمي بأنها اعتقلت الدكتور حسام أبو صفية، وهذا للأسف يعني.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rafat. So Dr. Rafat is thanking all of you for being here and for trying to speak up for Gaza. He's saying that the situation in Gaza is getting worse by the hour. He is reporting also about what has unfolded in northern Gaza and especially at Kamal Udwan Hospital in the last few days. The hospital has been invaded on Friday by the Israeli genocidal forces. Large parts of the hospital were destroyed and put on fire. All the patients were forcibly dislocated from the hospital. Those who are able to walk were forced to go to the Indonesian hospitals where they endured bad condition because the hospital is not functioning. Then they forced them to go to Gaza City. Most of the employees and the rest of the people who were in the hospital, a total of 240 people, were abducted. They were stripped naked. They were tortured. They were left in the cold weather, winter weather, with no clothes. That includes Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya. He's saying that for a while we did not know the whereabouts of Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya, but it has been formally announced today that he's under detention and torture as we speak. تفضل
يعني
دكتور رفت.
كمان التحدي الأكبر إنه الاحتلال أعلن عبر كل الوسائل إنه هو طالب بنقل المرضى وأجهزة وتجهيزات مستشفى كمال عدوان إلى المستشفى الأندونيسي، وهو يعلم مسبقا أنه قبل حوالي 10 أيام من اقتحام مستشفى عدوان اقتحمت قوات الاحتلال المستشفى الأندونيسي وعبثت في محتوياته ودمرت شبكة الكهرباء. وقوات الاحتلال تعلم بشكل جلي أن مستشفى الأندونيسي غير قادر على العمل، غير قادر لأنه شبكة الكهرباء والمياه والغازات الطبية غير متاحة وغير متوفرة، وبالتالي فكرة نقل المستشفى غير سليمة على الإطلاق.
So Dr. Rafat is sharing that the biggest challenge is that the Israeli forces demanded that the patients of Kamal Adwan Hospital be transferred by force, of course, to the Rantisi Hospital, fully knowing that they themselves invaded the Rantisi Hospital a week ago and destroyed it, and they know and fully aware that the Rantisi Hospital has not been functioning for a few months. It has no medical equipment, it has no staff, no personnel, no one to take care of these patients. To top all of this, there is no ambulances, there is no emergency vehicles to transport these very sick and critical patients who are left alone to fend for their lives now. With all the staff and the employees being abducted by Israel, we have reports of dozens of patients at Kamal Udwan Hospital who are the most critically injured in the ICU unit, who have no one to take care of them, no one to run their ventilators and their machines. And these people, these poor patients, are expected to locate themselves on their own to another hospital that is not functioning, has no personnel, and has no medical supply or oxygen or electricity or ventilators. Dr. Rafat.
بالإضافة أنه بهذه الطريقة التي اتبعها الاحتلال نقل 2 من المولدات الكهربائية، والآن أصبحوا موجودين في المستشفى الأندونيسي بدون أي فعالية، ونقل كل كميات السولار الموجودة في مستشفى كمال عدوان إلى الأندونيسي، وهو يعلم أيضا أنها غير مفعلة، أي أن الموارد البسيطة المتوفرة في شمال غزة أصبحت في مكان غير قابل للاستخدام. وطبعا المستشفى الأندونيسي لا يوجد فيه كوادر طبية، يوجد فقط دكتور الياس تكا أعتقد، ومعه بعض الفريق الإداري والتمريضي التي لا يتجاوز عددهم عن 10 أفراد، والمستشفى غير قادر على أن يكون فعالا على الإطلاق.
So the genocidal Israeli forces moved two all generators that are barely functional from Kamal Udwan Hospital to the Indonesian hospitals, claiming that this will take care of the patients. The Indonesian hospitals have no staff. They only have one doctor now and a few nurses and healthcare workers, but they have no supplies and no equipment, no medications to work with and to take care of these critically injured patients there. Go ahead.
بالقرب من مستشفى الأندونيسي هناك مستشفى العودة على بعد حوالي 200-250 متر فقط، أي أنهم بجوار بعض. طالبنا قوات الاحتلال أن يتم عبر الصليب الأحمر طبعا، طالبنا من قوات الاحتلال أن يتم نقل السولار إلى مستشفى العودة، لأن المستشفى يوجد فيها طواقم إدارية حوالي 66 من كوادرها الإدارية والطبية والتمريضية، وتحتاج إلى السولار لأنه لا يوجد لديها سولار. طالبنا من قوات الاحتلال عبر الصليب أن يتم نقل هذا السولار إلى مستشفى العودة، وللأسف رفضت قوات الاحتلال.
Dr. Rafat saying that their hospital, Al Auda Hospital, is only about 250 meters away from the Indonesian hospital. They do have some staff at Al Auda Hospital, and they can provide some care for those patients, but they don't have fuel to run their equipment. They demanded from Israel through the Red Cross to be provided with fuel so they can take care of their patients, but their appeal has been rejected so far.
القضية في تدمير مستشفى كمال عدوان وإخراجه عن الخدمة، وتدمير البليغ اللي حدث في مستشفى الأندونيسي وإخراجه عن الخدمة، ليس فقط في الأثر على الحرمان من الخدمات الطبية التي تقدمها هذين المستشفيين، بل الخطر الأكثر أن هناك خدمات أخرى تقدم من المستشفيات لبعضها البعض. على سبيل المثال، إخراج المستشفى الأندونيسي عن الخدمة يعني أن خدمة العناية المركزة التي تقدم لمرضى الأندونيسي وكافة مرضى المستشفيات الأخرى بما فيها كمال عدوان وسابقا مستشفى بيت حانون وحاليا مستشفى العودة، لأن مستشفى العودة على سبيل المثال تعتمد عندما تحتاج إلى إدخال حالة إلى العناية المركزة تريد أن تحولها أو تقوم بتحويلها إلى المستشفى الأندونيسي. إغلاق المستشفى الأندونيسي أي أن الخدمات الجراحية أصبحت غير مأمونة، لأنه لا يوجد هناك عناية مركزة في شمال قطاع غزة. هذا من جهة.
So Dr. Rafat is sharing that these hospitals that are present in Gaza, especially in the north, are very small hospitals. None of them is able to function on their own. They used to cooperate between each other. Like in Al Auda Hospital, they don't have intensive care units. They cannot do major surgeries. So they used to transfer these patients to the Indonesian hospitals in that regard because they used to have intensive care units. And the Kamal Udwan Hospital also used to serve certain types of surgeries and provide for certain type of patients and injuries. So these hospitals used to cooperate with each other and transfer patients between each other to provide reasonable service. None of them is big enough. None of them is a tertiary care. None of them has all the equipment to do it all. Now, with Kamal Udwan Hospital down and the Indonesian hospital, which has been down for a few months now, they're facing a grave danger because none of these hospitals is able to function now. All the people in the north now, more than 75 to 100,000 people, are left without any access to any type of health care or rescue services at the moment. تفضل دكتور رافد.
بالإضافة إلى أن على سبيل المثال أيضا مستشفى كمال عدوان كانت تضم في بين أقسامها قسم الحضانة، أي أن المستشفيات الأخرى تقدم خدمة الولادة، وعندما تحتاج بعض الحالات إلى خدمة الحضانة كانت تحولها إلى مستشفى كمال عدوان التي تملك أيضا قسم ولادة. وبالتالي الآن دمر قسم الولادة في مستشفى كمال عدوان ودمرت الحضانة، أي أن مستشفى العودة التي تقدم خدمة الولادة أصبحت خدمة الولادة أيضا غير آمنة، لأنها تحتاج إلى تحويل الأطفال إلى الحضانة في بعض الأحيان، والآن بعد تدمير كمال عدوان لا يوجد هناك حضانة.
So Dr. Rafat is sharing that Kamal Udwan Hospital was the only hospital in the north that has the neonatal unit to take care of the infants. Although they do have a maternity unit at Al Auda Hospital, they still depended on Kamal Udwan Hospital for the new birth and deliveries who needed intensive care or neonatal care. Now that this unit is down, they don't feel safe offering their maternity service and birthing units now, because they have nowhere to send the infants who are delivered in unhealthy condition or need intensive care. Knowing the situation in Gaza for the last year, knowing the starvation, the malnutrition, the poor situation of the mothers, of the pregnant women, we know that most of these deliveries are complicated now. Most of these mothers and babies are sick, and they need more than the usual regular care. So this makes their work much more challenging by the day. تفضل دكتور رافت.
طبعا والكارثة الكبرى الآن التي نواجهها أن مستشفيات شمال قطاع غزة قبل العدوان وأثناء العدوان كانت تعتمد على إنتاج الغازات الطبية وتحديدا غاز الأكسجين من مستشفى كمال عدوان ومستشفى الأندونيسي. طبعا مستشفى الأندونيسي دمرت محطة إنتاج الغازات قبل عدة أشهر، والآن للأسف دمرت من ضمن الأقسام الموجودة في كمال عدوان دمرت أيضا محطة الأكسجين، وبالتالي أصبحت مستشفى العودة الوحيدة الآن في شمال غزة لا يوجد لها مصدر لتزويدها بالأكسجين.
They also used to rely on Kamal Udwan Hospital and Indonesian Hospital for the medical gases, because they are the only two hospitals that have the capability to generate the medical gas and the oxygen. Al Auda Hospital used to get their needs for gas from Al Auda Hospital. Now that the Al Auda Hospital is out of service, completely destroyed, and as we all know, was set on fire a few days ago. They don't have any access to any medical gases, and of course, they don't have fuel to run their generators. So again, this also makes the situation much more challenging. This puts all the people in the north of Gaza at grave danger of absence of any kind of medical help or services. Dr. Rafat, I'm going to end at this point. We're going to come back with you with questions once we hear from our panelists. Many of them will be asking you questions, so please stay with us, and we will come back with you, give the opportunity to our guests and panelists to share what they have to say about the situation. دكتور رافت، أنا برجع لك كمان شوي. Many of our panelists and our people will have questions for you, so please خليك معنا. ولما يكون في أسئلة we will share it with you. Now, I think let's go to Dr. Mark Perlmutter. Dr. Mark, you've been to Gaza. You treated patients, you treated wounded. Israel claims that these hospitals are used as terrorist bases. They are attacking these hospitals because they have proof and confirmation that these hospitals have been used as bases for terror, and some of these workers are terrorists. Please share with us, did your experience there, did you at any point encounter any evidence of what Israel is claiming to be the case?
Well,
and thank you for being with us.
Sure, my pleasure. I'm honored to join this group. First of all, let me point out that when I went there, I was a victim of the propaganda. I am of Jewish heritage, and swallowed the propaganda fully. And I went there only because, as president of the International College of Surgeons and the World Surgical Foundation, and 40 years of overseas mission work focusing on children, I knew that the population was 50% children, and I was going to help children irrespective of my political thoughts. And it was very clear the day that I got there that this was a genocide in the making. I was there when the World Central Kitchen vans got bombed. There were 250 trucks on the way in and thousands of trucks on the way out, waiting to get through an still open Rafah border, because they wouldn't provide to the truck drivers the deconfliction that was necessary to deliver the aid. You think about it, we saw 30 miles of trucks on the way out. They were 8 trucks wide. That's enough to encircle Gaza 3 times, bumper to bumper, 8 trucks just through the Rafah crossing. The second week that we're there, the bombings kept getting closer to the hospital. The bombings were focused based on drone presence, which began around 3 o'clock, 3:30, getting ready to monitor where the collections of women and children would be, for iftar. And then when iftar would start, the bombings would start and become much more concentrated, which is why 90% of the patients who would come in mass casualties were children. 5 to a gurney, no less than 4 gurneys at a time. A third of the children would come in, put on the ambulances alive, but a third were dead when they got to us. A third would die in front of us, and a third would die within the next week or two in front of us. And it was nothing to see an empty bed the next day. It was clear that the hospitals were being targeted. I myself broke a finger and lost a tooth in a bombing that was right outside the hospital, and getting a detached retina fixed. That's been getting worse. And then, but it's not a woe is me thing, because although the hospital was targeted, and healthcare workers such as myself got hurt, there were specific targeting of healthcare workers. Many of the patients I took care of have horrible stories of being specifically targeted after being shot, taken to an Israeli prison, starved in that prison, blindfolded, handcuffed, with an open bullet wound inflicted while in the operating room, taking care of a patient, ordered to leave that patient. He refused doing his duty, closing a wound, and an orthopedic nurse shot in the knee and then taken prisoner. Stories like that are pervasive. I've operated on many people with lacerated nerves with the experimental tungsten bullets, and with mysterious entrance and exit wounds, very similar to the fledgets that were outlawed many years ago, that are still being used in a different form. The definitive population of women and children that were overwhelmingly the victim population screams genocide to us, in addition to the restriction of it. And most importantly, not only were 90% of our patients children, but when you look at the statistics scholarly collected by Dr. Feroz Sidwa in the New York Times article, when you break down the numbers, 83% of American-only doctors who were polled, 83% of those that treated children, because not everybody was there treated children, but 83% of those that treated children, laid hands on a child, saw a child that was shot by a sniper rifle in the chest or the head. And I myself saw 2 children that were targeted both in the chest and the head. Both came in simultaneously. And one of them had a male caregiver, and I neglected to ask because of the language barrier and the horrible commotion that was going on in an emergency room that's smaller than my kitchen. This male caregiver could be a father, could be an uncle. I asked him what happened through a translator, and he told me that he was walking his son, or the male child, and it felt him pull out of his hand. He looked for him, looked down at the ground close to him, didn't see him. 10 meters away, he saw him. And then he saw his body get shot a second time. He looked to where the shot came from, identified an Israeli soldier. He ran to his kid and brought him in. But when he brought him in, he didn't have a chest. The small entrance wound is typical of a high velocity gun wound. And when I rolled him over, no organs between his shoulder blades existed. His spine, his lungs, his heart were all gone. My hand fell into his chest cavity. And yet he saw his potentially son or nephew, whatever, he saw him get shot in the head the second time. And this kid definitively had 2 high velocity bullet wounds. It's the first time I've held the brains of a child. So the genocide was definitive in my own sight. In terms of seeing a combatant, there were absolutely none. We saw one person who had a gunshot wound. It was not a high velocity wound. It was a pistol wound, acknowledged from the security guards at the hospital. This guy was a crook. He was caught stealing from people, and he was shot by a pistol. We actually, Dr. Sidwa and the group that I was with saved his life. But he was a criminal, a local crook, not a combatant. We never at any time saw anybody in military clothing. We never saw a military wound. We never saw anybody who suffered from a military wound. We never saw a rifle. We never saw anybody who could even remotely be accounted for as a military combatant on the premises of the hospital or outside of it. The hospital grounds at the European Gaza hospital were filled with patients, tens of thousands of displaced families looking at it as a protected environment, and thousands of patients. There are young male patients, but they all had wounds, and most of them were infections, superficial infections, none of which would even remotely be considered a battle wound. We just simply never saw it. The acting director of the hospital, the head director, was told to leave or his family home would be bombed, and so he left, I believe, to Egypt. The acting director, which I believe was a nurse, very brave human being, gave me a tour of the hospital. There were no tunnels underneath of it. There was a 3-foot tall HVAC tunnel that was filled with piping that no human can crawl under. And there was no hidden spaces underneath or on above. And the hospital could have easily been taken over by the Israelis. There's 5 entrances. They could have put an American Bradley fighting vehicle in front of every one of them. It's a straight shot hallways with 4 stairwells. They could have put guards at the entrances, checked SIM cards of people coming into the emergency room to see if they had contacts. They could have kept that hospital operational instead of closing it a month after I left. But they chose not to, claiming it to be a bastion for combatants, of which there were absolutely none. I can't really offer anything else, I think.
Thank you, Dr. Mark, for this clear and strong first account testimony from a doctor who's being there. Thank you for highlighting that most of the victims and the injured people that you encountered were children and women, that you did not see at any point any evidence of any militants, either as patients or personnel or anywhere in the hospital.
Absolutely not.
Thank you for being with us. We will come back with you with more questions. We want to go now to Mrs. Noura Arikat. She's an international lawyer. She's here with us to share her account on what's happening, what is the status of the international law, the domestic law, how Israel is impugn to destroy all these laws in front of all of us. Noura will not be with us for much longer because she has another commitment. That's why we're gonna have her share her take on what's happening. Thank you, Noura, for being with us. Go ahead.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Nidal. Thank you, Dr. Rifat Al-Mijdalawi. Thank you to the Doctors Against Genocide for this heavy lifting, Dr. Mark Palmater and Mimi Sayed. It's
Is the connection off or just me?
line of trying to avert that dystopian possibility. Sorry, is there a problem?
No, go ahead. I think it was on my end. Go ahead, Nora.
Sure. And I want to start by saying that just a slight confession that it was my childhood dream was actually to become a doctor so that I can travel the world and offer healing to everyone. And instead, because of my math and science deficiencies, I had to settle to be an attorney and a professor. But I find that we deal with the same formidable obstacles in terms of politics. It's the politics of international relations that has stymied the potential of international law in order to stem these atrocities. And it's the politics within the medical profession that has stymied an uprising against medical professionals who should be standing on a front line in unity at this moment in protest of the systematic annihilation of healthcare and healthcare systems in Gaza. I want to just say a few things about international law insofar as it's relevant. Dr. Jbour has asked me, one, what is the relevance of law, but two, why we haven't seen it restrain Israel at all. The first question is much more clear and doctrinal. There's two approaches to thinking about this. If we want to accept that this is actually a legitimate war that Israel is waging in order to defend itself, which it is absolutely not, because it is genocide and therefore illegitimate. But even if we accepted that that was the framework, this particular type of combat has already been anticipated in international law. It has been legislated under the additional protocols, both under irregular and regular combat within either a civil war framework. If Israel wants to insist that Gaza is part of its geography, obviously it's not. This is occupied territory. Or if it is what we understand it to be, a colonial occupation, in which case Israel has no right to self-defense. But if in fact it wants to insist upon that framework, that combat is regulated, particularly the attack on civilian objects should be protected. Highmost amongst them and utmost amongst them are hospitals under Article 52 of the first additional protocols is a protection for hospital and healthcare workers. Insofar as those facilities are used by a military belligerent in order to wage their combat, in this case, what we're hearing, that there might be Hamas militants here, that does not matter. If there were a gun or simply a passing of a militant, would not be sufficient to make any civilian object, certainly not a hospital, a legitimate target. Effective contribution to the combat, in which case we have seen over and over again that there has been nothing forthcoming to demonstrate that it has in order to justify some sort of military advantage. So while I respect very much this concern from witnesses who are telling us there were no militants in the facilities, no militants were treated medically, that would not be sufficient unless the hospital was transformed to make an effective contribution to the combat, which it has not. Instead, what we have seen is the systematic decimation of hospitals. Now, 17 out of the 36 hospitals have been made not functional. We have also seen that compounded by the deprivation of water, by sanitary facilities, as well as by
Dr. Riqat, your internet faded, so we lost your last few words. Sorry.
I apologize. My connection looks solid here, but I apologize for that.
Just like the last sentence, please.
If what I'm anticipating you did not hear, it was my own recounting of the systematic decimation on healthcare and the ability to save life. So if here we are to accept the propaganda that somehow Israel is waging a war, there is nothing that justifies them preventing the saving of life. And yet we see 17 out of 36 hospitals that have been rendered not functional. We see a deprivation of water, a deprivation of hygiene and sanitary capacity. We see a deprivation of medical supplies. We see a deprivation of food. We are seeing children freeze to death because of the destruction of 92% of residential facilities. In fact, what we are witnessing is the destruction of a future, the direct attack on children. This is a genocidal campaign, which, as now everyone has become well-versed in international law, is a genocide prohibited by the Genocide Convention that should become a obligation of all third-party states in order to hold Israel to account by suspending its military aid, by ending those all diplomatic relations, and now because of the ICC arrest warrants in order to arrest Netanyahu, Gallant, as well as, I would say, all rank and file soldiers who have identified themselves in glee as they're torturing Palestinians, to arrest them and to prosecute them. In this moment, I want to lift up in particular the name of Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, who has, I think all of us have been chilled to watch him stand tall as his son has been killed in an attempt to cruelly punish him, as well as to intimidate him, as we saw him face off Israeli tanks and nothing but a white coat, and now disappeared in detention in what has become a chronic and systematic attack on healthcare workers. I just want to recount a few things that we know. Human Rights Watch, for all of their shortcomings in this moment, have in April 2024 issued a report that demonstrated to us that healthcare workers have been systematically detained, tortured, sexually assaulted, and raped. We also understood that in April 2024 was the kidnapping, torture, and killing of Dr. Adnan Al-Bursh, a surgeon and the head of the orthopedic department in Al-Shifa, who was kidnapped before he was tortured to death. Dr. Riyad Al-Rantisi, the head of the maternity department of Kamal Adwan Hospital, who was kidnapped while caring for his patients and then died in captivity, we learned in June 2024. Dr. Muhammad Abu Salmiya, director of a Shifa hospital, kidnapped, detained for 7 months, subject to daily beatings, the deprivation of food before he was released, and then continued to care for his patients. In mid-September, the abduction and killing of Dr. Ziad Ad-Dalu from Al-Shifa Hospital, and again this continuing attack on healthcare and the possibility of survival, again indicating for us that this is a genocidal campaign which cannot be cut in any other way. All of Palestinians are being held hostage. All these health workers are being taken hostage. There is an absolute hypocrisy of those who lament that all of this is because of the taking of Israeli captives, and yet say nothing, not a peep, in response to the systematic mass campaign of hostage taking of Palestinians now and for decades prior. One of the primary explanations, Dr. Jbour, of why we do not see the law doing what we expect it to do is quite plainly racism. It is a lack of seeing the worth of Palestinian life. It is a lack of equality. It is the work of racism and colonialism that continues to create these conditions. And it is the work of our collective protest in these moments and a refusal to be silent against intimidation that will be the only thing we can depend on. The law will not save us. Only we have ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ariqat. Thank you. And I know you have to go, but I really want to ask you one more question. I want to emphasize one point. Is there ever an excuse to attack and bomb hospitals and healthcare workers? Yesterday, me and Krama and few healthcare workers went to Detroit, Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit, to have a vigil, just a vigil in the name of the healthcare workers. The minute we were close to the hospital, not even on the hospital grounds, on the sidewalk, more than 20 security guards and police officers jumped on us from the hospital fully armed with weapons and guns and not allowing us to be there. So this means that hospitals in the United States have weapons, have security guards, have police officers to protect them. So if the same analogy that Israel is playing, justifying to bomb hospitals there, that they do have a security guard there, this means our hospitals can be a target here at Henry Ford merely by having a security guard with a gun or a police officer with a gun. So is there ever a justification to attack hospitals, healthcare workers, unarmed civilians, children? And we will let you go after that. But if you please, I want to get your take on this for one more time.
I apologize that I tried to answer that question at the top, and I apologize that my connection was not strong enough. So you're asking me multiple questions. One is about, is there ever a legitimate reason to attack children? Never. No situation in which you can attack children. Is there ever a situation when you can attack health care workers? The only situation in which any civilian becomes, in law, becomes a legitimate target is when they're directly taking up arms. That is it. They to be directly participating in hostilities at which during time they can become legitimate targets. These are healthcare. And so obviously that's not justified. As to the situation of attacking hospitals, again, as I mentioned, Article 52, Additional Protocol 1, only when the hospital makes an effective contribution to combat, which means that even the presence of weapons, even the passing of a so-called militant in that case, even the caring and rehabilitation of somebody who's a wounded militant, none of those would suffice to turn a hospital or a medical facility into providing the effective contribution for combat. It has to achieve some sort of military advantage. All of these things that we're seeing, which Israel and the United States says that is never seen, it's unprecedented, are characteristics of anti-colonial warfare that we witnessed from the late 60s through the early 90s. All of it has been anticipated. All of it has been regulated in international law. And so the problem here is that Israel rejects the application of all law as making up its own law and advancing the worst forms of colonial genocide that we have seen in our time.
Thank you, Professor Arikat, for making this point loud and clear. There is never a justification to attack hospitals, healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, and children unless they are actively shooting at you. And I don't think Israel ever showed an evidence of that. So every attack Israel carried on the civilians, on the civilian infrastructure, healthcare workers, is all illegal. These are all war crimes. These are all intentional genocidal actions and crimes. And everything they say as an excuse for this, a justification for this, is illegal, is unfounded, and is wrong. These people, the genocidal state of Israel, its leadership, its army, its public should be held accountable for genocide. These are psychopathic, these are sick society, sick country that should be stopped by intervention of peaceful forces to protect the children, the hospitals. These are not normal people. They are not rational. We cannot negotiate with them any ceasefire. We cannot negotiate with them any protection of hospitals. These people need to be stopped by force, because we as doctors know that when we encounter a schizophrenic patients who are going into a violent crisis, we don't sit down and talk to them because their mind is not there. We cannot reason with them. You put them on medication, you restrain them. This is what Israel needs at this point from the international community, from the regional powers. And again, thank you, Professor Arikat, for joining us. Thank you for making it clear that everything that Israel is doing in Gaza, in Palestine, is beyond the law, is above the law, is illegal, is genocidal. And I think by now we have more than 24 international human rights organization that already confirmed and concluded that this is a genocide beyond any doubt. It's not an accusation anymore. It's not a risk of genocide. It has been a genocide ever since from day one. Thank you. Dr. Hawash?
Thank you so much. Dr. Riqat, before we let you go, I was asked by many of our members, we have a day on the Hill. We go to the Hill to the Senate and the Congress every month. And on the 8th of January, we are going, and we are hoping that Dr. Abu Safiya will be released. But if not, we will be advocating for his release. If you have time to join us, that would be amazing. And we will follow up with you later. I would like to bring Medea Benjamin. Medea is a long-time activist, and we have been very fortunate to meet her on the very first days of our advocacy on the Hill in DC. Medea was gracious enough to include us in her advocacy. She has been very supportive. We're very proud of her. We are very proud to have her. And we would like Medea to speak to us and reflect on the past 1.5 years of advocacy for ceasefire. Why did we fail? And maybe talk about strategies with the new administration and how we should tackle the next year of advocacy. And thank you. Medea, please go ahead.
Well, first, let me say, one, how heartbreaking it is to turn on the news every day and see what's happening in Gaza, and particularly the courage of the healthcare workers in Gaza and those of you in the US and around the world who put your lives at risk to go there. And also to know how heartwarming it was the first day that Doctors Against Genocide appeared in the Congress, and we saw you walking towards us in the atrium of the Hart Building with your white coats. It was like a vision from heaven, that there were these people who have so much legitimacy in the eyes of the public, and even in our Congress. Every time you come is so important. I myself started out as a healthcare worker, studying public health and traveling around the world, and seeing children dying in my eyes before me from malnutrition, and realizing that something was wrong politically in the world that would allow this to happen. And the politics of attacking children is something that we see just so incredibly clearly when it comes to what Israel is allowed to do. And so for the last 15 months, we've seen the Biden administration, including the Secretary of State, who is supposed to be a diplomat, being not just complicit, but partners with Israel in this genocide. And we've also seen it in Congress as well, in both the Republicans and the Democrats. And we've seen how the three major lobby groups that are so present in Congress and in the White House are making it so difficult for us. And that is the pro-Israel lobby groups like AIPAC, the Christian Zionists, and let's not forget the weapons industry that makes billions of dollars from so much of our tax money going to Israel. AIPAC this year has taken out two of the best politicians we had, Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman, and instilled fear in the rest of the people in Congress to speak out. And we also see how this next Congress is going to be even worse, controlled both houses by the Republicans, and how they are just ready to pass some horrific legislation that ranges from making it permanent that the US cannot fund UNRWA, attacking the international institutions like the International Criminal Court, for putting out arrest warrants of Netanyahu, so sanctioning the ICC, sanctioning South Africa for having the nerve to bring its genocide case to the International Court of Justice, and then going again after those of us here in the United States who have been speaking out. And that ranges from legislation to equate critique of Israel and Zionism with anti-Semitism. And this is particularly aimed at the students to take away federal funding from universities that don't crack down on students. And also then legislation aimed at non-governmental organizations that have been speaking out, giving the Treasury Department the ability to say that they are supporting terrorism and then close them down. So we are facing something even more difficult in this next administration. And let's remember that Trump, when he was in the presidency, he supported the West Bank settlements. He moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. He started the Abraham Accords to entice the Arab states to have normal relations with Israel, and throwing the Palestinians under the bus. And he has told Netanyahu that he should, quote, finish the job. And some of his appointees are just disastrous, like the appointee for U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, who says there's no such thing as a Palestinian, or his appointee, Elise Stefanik, for the U.S. The United Nations ambassador, who is the one who actually went on the attack against students and the universities when she was a member of Congress, and is calling for deporting students on foreign students with visas who are supporting Palestine. On the other hand, there are some countervailing forces that are important to recognize and to give us some hope. One is the international community. We just heard from a wonderful representative from South Africa. There are now 15 other countries that are supporting South Africa's suit at the International Court of Justice. And we see more countries that are holding Israel accountable in other ways, such as putting a weapons embargo on weapons to Israel. We also see that in our own country, that when there was a vote, thanks to Senator Sanders in the Senate, 40% of the Democratic senators did vote for conditioning, limiting weapons going to Israel. With the Republican in the White House, there will definitely be more Democrats who are willing to speak out. And we should remember that there are Trump supporters who don't want the U.S. involved in endless wars. And Trump himself said on the campaign trail that the U.S. should not be involved in endless wars. And then the most important thing, I think, is to say that despite the Israeli propaganda that is echoed by the U.S. media and by U.S. politicians, public opinion has changed so much in the past year in favor of Palestinians, so much so that it's not only a majority that wants a ceasefire, it's also a majority that doesn't want to keep sending weapons to Israel. And that is what we have on our side. And so as we move forward, we have to redouble our efforts. I am so glad that Doctors Against Genocide is having this day in Congress as soon as the new Congress gets back, because guess what? AIPAC is always there to flood the halls of Congress, especially in a new Congress. And we have to visit the offices of every new Congress member, as well as the 19 members of Congress who are doctors, who should be forced to be champions of what we are calling for. And so I look forward to being with you in the halls of the Congress, on the streets, everywhere we can be and must be in the coming year, to be as resolute as the Palestinians are, who will never give up. So thank you for having me on with you. I look forward to being with you in active support for Palestine in the coming year.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Medea, for your bravery, for your being everywhere where it matters. And we look forward to working together with you. We invite all our members, healthcare workers for Palestine, Doctors Against Genocide, any medical professionals who want to join us on the Hill, please sign up. And we get strength in numbers, and the more we have of you, the better. The more effective we can be. Go ahead, Dr. Shbour, please.
Again, thank you, Medea, for being a great mentor for Doctors Against Genocide. Thank you for being a great human being. Thank you for being a great activist. We learned a lot from you, and I'm sure there is a lot more that we're going to learn. So hopefully we'll come back with you with more questions and about what can we do going forward. And I'm sure we're going to be seeing you soon on the Hill. Again, thank you, Medea. Now we're going to Professor Finkelstein. And I don't know what to tell you, Dr. Finkelstein. You know it all. You know more than all of us about what's happening. So the floor is open for you to share your take on what's happening. But I have one specific question that I want you to also comment on, which is the weaponization of anti-Semitism. Do you think that the allegation and accusation of anti-Semitism have been used in the last year to enable genocide, to enable war crimes? Can we at this point reach the conclusion that the anti-Semitism weaponization has made these accusations, these claims, as a tool for genocide, to enable genocide, to silence any criticism or anyone who speaks against genocide? But again, please, we need to hear everything you have to say about your take on the current situation. And thank you for being with us, Professor Finkelstein. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm going to try to cover some ground that's not been covered already, although I want to confirm that I agree with pretty much everything, pretty much everything that has been said. I want to just make some brief points and then turn to the question that you mentioned or you asked. The first point is that it was clear from day one, October 8th, that Israel had embarked on a genocide in Gaza. I said at the time that it was clear Israel's motive had changed from in the past. In the past, Israel's motive in Gaza had been, as it called it, I'm using Israel's language, it was mowing the lawn in Gaza. But after October 7th, Israel saw the crisis that occurred on October 7th as also an opportunity. That's a cliche, but cliches are often accurate. They saw the horror that occurred on October 7th was also an opportunity to, for once and for all, to solve the Gaza question, to once and for all liquidate the Gaza question. So they weren't going to mow the lawn in Gaza. They were going to extirpate, that means pull out by the roots. They were going to extirpate every blade of grass in Gaza, those 2.3 million people, of whom half are children. Now, if there were any doubt that Israel was embarking on a final solution to the Gaza question, the Israeli rhetoric from on high, from the very top, meaning the prime minister, the defense minister, the president of Israel, the rhetoric from the very top all the way down to the bottom and across the political spectrum, the rhetoric was, without any pretense, the rhetoric was genocidal. In fact, at this point, you can literally collect a full book volume, and it has been done. You can literally collect a full book volume, a hefty book volume of genocidal statements across the spectrum of Israeli society and at every level of Israeli society. In May 2024, the South Africans submitted to the Security Council a very hefty volume of statements by Israelis across the political spectrum, advocating the liquidation of the Gaza question. Lee Mordecai, a Princeton-trained historian, he put out his own compilation. And what was outstanding in his compilation is the large number of references he collected of simply posting, social media postings of genocidal statements and acts by Israelis in Gaza or about Gaza. It was very clear from day one when the prime minister said, remember Amalek, which, as has been repeatedly pointed out, both by Bet Selem, the Israeli Information Center for Human Rights in the Occupied Territories, and also in the recent the recent Amnesty International report on the genocide in Gaza. They said it was perfectly obvious when the prime minister said, remember Amalek, that he was advocating a genocide against every man, woman, and child in Gaza. So you had the statement from the prime minister, you had the statement from the president of Israel, who said that there's no such a thing as civilians in Gaza. And then you had the order as issued by the defense minister Gallant was not to admit any food, water, fuel, or electricity into Gaza. So it doesn't require a rocket scientist or even a medical doctor to figure out that if you hermetically seal a tiny parcel of land and don't admit any food, water, fuel, or electricity, you have set out on a genocidal policy. Now, the fact is, within very narrow constraints imposed mostly by the US behind the scenes, apart from those minimal marginal constraints, that policy of no food, fuel, water, or electricity has endured from the second week of October 2023 until today. So I do not believe there is any legitimate grounds for questioning whether or not Israel is carrying out a genocide in Gaza. Number two, I would say what happened in the past 14 months has exposed the complete bankruptcy of the international, not only political order, but the complete bankruptcy of the international legal order. The fact of the matter is that both that political and legal order had created the conditions, had laid the foundation for everything that happened after October 7th. First of all, was the international political and legal order that allowed for that inhuman and illegal blockade of Gaza, which caused October 7th. Number two, there have been so many UN reports of legal bodies documenting Israel's war crimes and crimes against humanity over the past 20 or more years. And never were any of those reports which run literally to tens of thousands of pages of documentation. Yesterday, I finally decided to take to the incinerator room several tens of thousands of pages because they had simply cluttered my whole apartment. All this documentation, all of this evidence, all of this proof of Israel's commission of war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza, and none of it was ever acted upon. So what is the message that was being transmitted to Israel, except that they could literally get away with murder? And that message was, so to speak, taken to heart by the Israelis on October 8th, when they decided not only were they able to get away with murder, but they would take it to the next step and just finish off Gaza. Now, there's one other item I want to address. It was not just the inaction of the international political and legal community. It was the outright corruption in the legal and criminal sense. It's the current vice president of the International Court of Justice, Julie Sebutindi, who, in my opinion, and I don't say this flippantly or cavalierly, she's either being bribed or blackmailed by Israel. She is an agent of Israel on the International Court of Justice. There is the former chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Fatou Bensouda. She too, during her term of office, was transparently either being bribed or blackmailed by Israel. There is the special representative of the Secretary General, Gutierrez, Pramila Patten. Her report on the alleged rape that occurred on October 7th, for which, as of now, there is zero. I want your listeners to hear me, because I have a record of at least being accurate about the facts. There is zero material evidence that rape occurred on October 7th. There is no forensic evidence. There is no digital evidence. There is no medical evidence. There is zero evidence. And Pramila Patten, that special representative of the Secretary General, promoted the lie of rape on October 7th and facilitated the genocide in Gaza. There is that moral monster, you hear me? Moral monster Sheryl Sandberg, the former chief operating officer of Meta, who put out this filthy film called Screams Before Lies, which was then not premiered, but shown at the Biden White House, also promoting the lie of rapes on October 7th, for which, as of now, I repeat, there is no material evidence. There is the former president of the ICJ, Joan Donoghue, the American representative on the court, who lied in April 2024 when she said on BBC television, the program Hard Talk, she said that the ICJ had not found that Israel was plausibly committing genocide. That was a flat out lie, a careerist, opportunist lie. Now, I could go on and on and on, but these people need finally to be called out. They're being bribed, they're being blackmailed by Israel, or they're just the most debased, depraved opportunists and careerists. In the case of Sheryl Sandberg, the billionaire former chief operating officer, she is just a Jewish supremacist. She sees it as her personal calling and responsibility to defend Israel's right to commit genocide. And that, I'm afraid, is exactly what they believe, that Israel, Jews, have the right to commit genocide. That's their mindset. They are Jewish supremacists. Ms. Medea Benjamin, she mentioned a moment ago, the assault on our colleges and universities. But who led the assault? It was Jewish supremacist billionaires like Bill Ackman, like Barry Sternlicht, like Robert Kraft, Ackman at Harvard, Sternlicht at Brown, Kraft at Columbia, who blackmailed, who held hostage our universities, our premier universities, and told them, unless you crush the student protests against genocide, we are going to withhold our hundreds of millions of dollars in alumni donations. These people need to be called out. They need to be held accountable. We shouldn't just use broad terms like the international political order, the international legal system. There are individuals who are personally, criminally, and morally guilty of facilitating the genocide of a people who have been held hostage in a concentration camp. By the way, if you go back and look at the historical record, already in the 1950s, when Gaza was under Egyptian administration, all the way back from the 1950s, and you go forward, straight forward. I don't have the time now to document it. If you go from the 50s forward, the Egyptian administration, the Israeli administration, the same term keeps coming up in the observations of all outsiders. Over and over and over again, it said Gaza is a concentration camp. Gaza is a concentration camp. It's the recurring description of that place. And now, in the last stage, the concentration camp has been converted into a death camp. That's the facts. And these individuals, the Judge Sebutindi, the Fatou Bensouda, the Pramila Patten, the Sheryl Sandberg, all of them have facilitated and abetted this horror that's occurred over the past, it's really not only the past 14 months, but now we're at the final stage of it. And they pretend that they're doing this in solidarity with Jews against, fighting anti-Semitism. They use the anti-Semitism in order to abet and facilitate the genocide. Because at heart, at the bottom, the others, the Sabatindis, the Bensoudas, the Pramila Pattons, they're just crooks and the Donahues. They're crooks and careerists. Crooks and careerists. You're run-of-the-mill crook and you're run-of-the-mill careerist. But when it comes to the Sheryl Sandbergs, the Bill Ackmans, the Barry Sternlichs, the Robert Krafts, and on and on and on, they're just Jewish supremacists who hide behind their Jewishness in order to facilitate and abet the genocide.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Professor Finkelstein. Thank you for sharing this brave and unwavering truth to the world. Supremacy is a danger to all of us. Jewish supremacy, white supremacy is putting the whole world in danger. They are doing it in Gaza now, but any one of us, all of us are at risk of it here at home too, especially with the coming administration. And I'm afraid that what Israel is doing there will become the new norm in the whole world. And each and every one of us is at risk of being the next victim. As they said during the Holocaust, they first came to the socialists, but I was not a socialist, so I did not care. Then they came for the unionists. I was not a unionist, I did not care. Then they came for the Jews, and I was not a Jew, I did not care. Then they came for me, and by the time they came for me, there was no one left to stand up for me. And I think this is a lesson that you highlighted very well, that we are all targets, we are all in this, and we should stop it. First, out of our own humanity, out of our own deep belief in justice, equality, and that all human life is equal. But even for those who don't want to do it out of this, they should do it for their own sake. And if anyone who allows this to continue, they are doing this at their own peril. And one day they might be the next target. Thank you again, Professor Finkelstein. Dr. Hawash, do you want to introduce Dr. Jill Stein, our honorary DAG member? Thank you, Dr. Jill.
Thank you, Nidal. Thank you, Professor Finkelstein. Thank you for all our speakers. This is the power that we lean on to create our movement that will hopefully make this world safer and free of genocide for all of us. Just now we heard that another hospital was targeted by Israel. The 5th floor of Al-Wafa Hospital was bombed. Students of the Islamic University College of Medicine were taking their internal medicine exams. 2 students and a teacher sustained minor injuries, and 7 hospital staff were killed. This is what we are up against. We focus our eyes again and again on Gaza, and we focus our eyes on our colleagues, and we will do everything in our power to stop this, release the hostages, and release the doctors who have been kidnapped, and put the safety of our people first. Before I introduce Dr. Jill Stein, I just want to point the attention of people that we have several links in the chat. People are asking what to do, what actions to do. We do have the Advocacy Day on the Hill on the 8th of January. That's a good day to join. We also have a petition to release Dr. Abu Safiya that we will share widely with the Congress and the Senate and the current administration. We are also approaching the new administration with our requests, our legitimate demands to end the genocide and provide safety for the children, for the civilians, for the hospitals. And I would like to introduce my personal friend and our Doctors Against Genocide member. We're very proud of you, Dr. Jill Stein. Dr. Jill Stein ran a very principled presidential campaign that was squarely focused on anti-genocide, amongst many important principled social stances to improve our country. We supported her, we spoke with her, we attended rallies with her. We look forward to continuing the fight with her, and the future is ours, Dr. Jill Stein. So please, we would like you to discuss with us what your plans are in the next couple of years, what's the role of the Green Party in organizing against genocide, and what strategies should we all take together with you? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Kumar, and also to all of the doctors in Doctors Against Genocide and to everyone here who has made such a powerful impact in this struggle. And your words are amazing. These words should be heard by the whole nation, by the whole world. And there's no doubt that these words are being very specifically suppressed. This is a very threatening conversation because, as others have said, there's enormous, widespread opposition to this horrific genocide, which becomes more horrific by the day, and which the assault on all of the hospitals, but in particular, this very dramatic 2-month and longer assault on Kamal Adwan Hospital, and the amazing bravery of their staff, like all of the medical workers in Gaza and those in Doctors Against Genocide and other organizations who've gone to support the struggle for healthcare. But this struggle around healthcare is such a profound symbol of this fight of the best of humanity, exemplified very much by Dr. Hassam Abu Safiya. He is really such an incredible, heroic example. And I think so many people have seen now the photograph of him in his white coat, marching, walking away from the ruins of the hospital towards these tanks, perhaps being arrested. I'm not sure what the setting was, but this was just before his arrest. And it's just such a symbol of the selflessness, of the incredible sense of humanity, and the dedication to service after he himself had been injured by the attack of the IDF previously. Maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago, he had been injured. His own son was killed. Many members of the hospital staff have been killed, patients, people seeking refuge there. This is such an epitome of this, this clash of forces of good against evil. I hate to use those terms, but if anything warrants them, this certainly does, because the genocide being executed by Israel, Netanyahu, and the IDF is just beyond words. And in the same way that the darkness, the brutality, the utter depravity of this assault is one extreme, the other extreme is the incredible human spirit that's on which the healthcare workers are acting, which Dr. Abu Safiya exemplifies, and which the whole spirit of the whole world really has unified against. And typically, you know, in United Nations votes, it's generally the US and Israel, occasionally with one or two of their vassal states, against the rest of the world. And in as much as this is an absolute assault on the people of Palestine, this is also an absolute assault on human rights and on international law. And as Dr. Jabour just mentioned, we're all at risk in this assault on international law, especially now, because the United States has been the dominant power for decades, really the unopposed power since the fall of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s. The US really has been the unopposed empire, but we are no longer the unopposed or the dominant empire. And it's very clear, not to those in power, but really to the rest of the world, that we are now in a multipolar world, and we very much need to act in a shared power setting. We need to go from being the bully in the schoolyard to being an adult in the room with the international community, operating according to international law and human rights. But this country does not observe international law, and we can see international law under attack in all the ways that Noura Erakat so beautifully described. International law is being shredded here right before our very eyes. And this conversation is so extremely dangerous to the prevailing order because of the moral authority and the legitimacy, especially of healthcare workers who are you know, really the essence of self-sacrifice and risk-taking right now on behalf of humanity. And you know, so there's enormous moral authority here, and a big shout out and thank you again to everyone here, and especially to Doctors Against Genocide, for your bravery and your courage and standing up as you did the other day, as you just described, at a Detroit hospital and being targeted and silenced and threatened with arrest. You know, it's very much not just international law and human rights that are being destroyed. It's really our democracy, which is under assault. What's left of our democracy, what's left of our civil liberties, our right to protest, our right to free speech and freedom from censorship. And, you know, I know that everyone on this call has really been very much targeted in so many ways. And along with the suppression of our right to free speech and our right even to talk about what is the majority opinion in this country, that is being suppressed. We are being threatened in all kinds of ways, with loss of jobs, loss of status, with arrest, for exercising our basic freedoms of speech. But for those who've been confronted by the police, we know how much our police forces have likewise been corrupted, very much by the IDF. And in fact, the Israeli occupation forces, shall we call them, it's not a defense, it's an occupation. The Israeli attack forces, you know, are now in the business of training police forces all around the world and in this country through these arrangements whereby state forces are being trained by the IDF. And the cop cities, which are being constructed all over this country, are places where these very violent and oppressive and dehumanized tactics in policing are being taught to our police. So it is, you know, it's not a simple matter to simply exercise our basic freedoms here in order to right the cause here. And when you mentioned, Dr. Kumail, you know, what my plans are, you know, I see my plans not different from the plans of the rest of us, which is to really fight like our lives depend on it, for our democracy and for a foreign policy that reflects our democracy. Because, you know, our political system is bought and paid for, our Congress is bought and paid for by AIPAC, by the war machine, by the health insurance industry, by the real estate developers, et cetera. You know, the problem that we have in foreign policy is the same problem we have in all policies. And I don't mean that to be, you know, doomsday, you know, declaration, but actually rather a declaration of strength. And I want to cite here two people, Frederick Douglass, who said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will." And thanks to Doctors Against Genocide for helping to lift up this demand of basic humanity to end this, this genocide. But that demand, goes way beyond the healthcare profession. And I think, it's not rocket science to say that there is no right to healthcare in a genocide. And we cannot really establish functioning hospitals and a functioning healthcare system in the midst of a genocide. This is really a microcosm of the genocide that we are witnessing at Kamal Adwan Hospital. And so this is very much part of a bigger fight. And the bigger we can make this fight, the stronger our voices will be. Because in fact, if democracy prevailed, there would be no genocide right now, as Medea Benjamin mentioned. And again, a shout out to Medea for her, incredible bravery in confronting these abuses of power in so many ways and putting herself at risk and being subjected to physical abuse as well for doing so. As Medea mentioned, it's 68% of Americans who oppose the genocide, and it's something like 62% who are on record as demanding that we have a weapons embargo right now. The American people support that. Some 52 nations around the world have already signed on to calling a letter calling for a weapons embargo. We need, in my view, we need to mobilize as many voices as possible. And we can do that obviously through things like the petition that Karma mentioned earlier. There's a petition here supporting these actions of Doctors Against Genocide and the call to free Dr. Abu Safia for his freedom and protection. We can sign petitions. We should undoubtedly also have letters, a letter writing campaign and a phone call campaign to members of Congress, as well as showing up. And I think it'd be wonderful for us to organize at least a day, if not, regular days, where the general public can come in support of the doctor's plea with the moral authority, because what's going on in the healthcare system is it is a microcosm of the genocide. It really contrasts the utter depravity of this assault against the utter humanity and self-sacrifice of the healthcare workers. It is a teachable moment, and the more people who are involved in this, the better. We ought to have, I think, a petition among healthcare workers in this country as well, because so many of them have tuned out. And I think it's this is a teachable moment and a teaching opportunity to actually let people know exactly what's going on and request their support here for just our basic, healthcare institutions that are under attack in violation of international law in a way that puts us all at risk. And I want to make one last point here, which is that this overall corruption, of our democracy that we see playing out in Congress, that we see playing out in our elections, the role of big money in basically charting our course here, it has another impact, which is that people are suffering in this country. There's a war on working people here in the same way that there is a war on many of the countries around the world. In Dr. Martin Luther King's words, "My country is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today." It was true then and it's true now. Well, accompanying that war around the world, there's also a war here on working people, which I know people are very aware of, working people and the marginalized communities of color, immigrants and so on. And I saw a shocking statistic yesterday. This just came out that there's been an 18% increase in homelessness just in the last year. That's absolutely unparalleled. This in a country where, the 3 billionaires own as much wealth as the lower 50%, where some 66%, I think, of Americans now are living paycheck to paycheck, where half of all renters are struggling to keep a roof over their heads. 100 million Americans are struggling against medical debt. and so on. We have an incredible rising tide of misery in this country. And we see people, voting with their feet here against the political establishment in this race, in this past election. Or we're 1 out of every 3 voters elected to stay home, rejecting the 2 candidates representing endless war and Wall Street being rammed down our throats, with knowledge of other candidates being systematically denied to people so they don't know that they have other choices or what those other choices represent. People are voting with their feet. This is an incredible moment of political rebellion. It's a moment of rebellion against genocide as well. It's a rebellion against the inhumanity of our own healthcare system here as well. And to connect these dots, one need only to point out that it is our military budget which is consuming over half of our congressional discretionary expenditures. Over half of the congressional budget is now being spent on the endless war machine, of which this genocide is the tip of the iceberg, really, and a very powerful symbol. So ultimately, to the extent we can bring people who are struggling against the war on working people together with the people who are struggling against the genocide, then we become a really unstoppable force together. And taking a model from the BDS movement, which has had a very powerful impact on Israel. 1 out of every 3 Israelis, this was as of about 6 weeks ago, stated their intent to leave Israel. It's not easy living in a genocidal state, although so much of Israel is in complete denial. That is absolutely true. But even so, Israel is still a genocidal and fascistic state. And things are very difficult inside of Israel itself, and its economy has been crashing, has been crashing and burning as well. So the BDS movement has contributed to that and has made a real, has had a real impact in holding Israel accountable, which it must do. And of course, that boycott, divestment, and sanctions of Israel should be spread, should be adopted at a national level all around the world. It should be a matter of policy, really, in the UN. But in the meantime, here, whatever we can do to help mobilize working people together with people of conscience and the opposition to the genocide being conducted in Gaza, to the extent that we can begin to organize that as a day of boycott, for example, a day of a work stoppage or something on that order that begins to actually have real traction and begins to actually use the power of our numbers to overcome the suppression of our democracy, to begin to actually have an impact with specific goals. For example, a weapons boycott. There's so much we can do, and I want to end quoting Alice Walker, the poet and novelist, who said what I think is the companion to Frederick Douglass' statement that power concedes nothing without a demand. Well, as Alice Walker pointed out, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with, and by connecting the dots among the various dimensions of this struggle, because the struggle against empire and genocide is inseparable from the struggle against the war on working people here at home and around the world. The more these struggles are connected, the more power we have to actually take back our democracy and an America and a world that works for all of us. And I look forward to our continuing work together. Again, thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jill Stein. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a strong voice for justice and equality and humanity. We learned a lot from you. You have been an inspiration for us, and we're looking forward to continue to work with you in the next few years and to explore all kinds of ways to create a better world, a better system than the failing system that we have been all living under. And thank you for being with us today. We want to apologize to all our guests here and all our the people who are on the Zoom call because meeting is taking longer. But this was done by design because we think our colleagues in Gaza, the people of Gaza, deserve that we try to have all the voices out there to speak out for them, to brainstorm all of us ways that we can help our colleagues, our doctors, and our people in Gaza. So the more, the better. We need to unite all our voices. We need to unite all our ideas. We need to do everything we can. I know it might take us a little bit longer, but that's fine. Dr. Hussam, his colleagues, the people of Gaza deserve it all. We're going to go a little bit off schedule because we have one of the doctors, Dr. Falashin Silvani, who has been on multiple missions to Gaza, and she is planning to go to Gaza next month. She has 2 missions. She's leading them, going into Gaza next month. She has another meeting that she has to go to prepare her mission. So we'll give her a few minutes to share with us, what's happening with her, what was her experience, what difficulties or obstacles she's facing now with her missions, and how much support she needs for her mission to be successful. And again, I think her first mission is going to be January 8th. The second mission is going to be January 23rd. Dr. Farashin, welcome. Thank you for being with us. Go ahead, share with us your experience and what do you want our guests to hear from you?
Thank you, Dr. Jabbour. Sorry, guys, I know it's, I'll make it quick. So basically, I've been to Gaza 3 times so far. This will be my 4th one going. I do organize and coordinate these missions as well. And as a matter of fact, I just got off the Zoom meeting with the team that's going in in 2 weeks. And I go in as a physician as well. Now, one of the challenges that we've been facing as as organizing this mission and leading this mission is the fact that as time goes on, initially, we had Rafah was opened, we were able to take medical supplies with us, medication with us. So that was somehow, it does not justify the fact that we are, they don't have more supplies, but at least we had some access that we were able to take some medical supplies with us, some medications with us. However, after Rafah border was closed, now we're going through the Jordan, we're very limited about how much we can take with us. We are very limited about, we're not able to take any medications with us unless if it's your personal medication. We're only able take a very small instrument kit with us for the specialty, but that's very challenging, especially with many of these cases that I'm sure you're all aware of, is they're very complex cases and they require multiple subspecialty to work on one patient. You will need, for example, I'm just going to give you an example, a child that comes in, you may need vascular, you may need ophthalmology, you may, oculoplastic, you may need, orthopedic, all working in the same patient, but we have lack of supplies and instrument. It's making it more and more difficult. So right now, and every time I go, it's more challenging to perform our job as physicians and as humanitarian. It's very challenging and hard to see these, patients that you can only provide limited level of care to them. I trained here in the U.S. I studied. I graduated from the U.S. I trained here, and I know the standard of care. Unfortunately, we are not. I don't think I've been able to provide the standard of care in Gaza, since the war started. And that's one of the challenges that we have. The other challenges that we've been having is that the safety of our staff. Unfortunately, even though we have clearance to be there, our staff still facing, for example, today, one of the buildings right next to the hospital of Al-Ahli Hospital was hit, and our staff is actually there. And the safety, it's a huge, for our humanitarian providers, it's still not guaranteed, and that's another challenge that we face. So we really hope, that something can be, prioritized, because they do need medical providers, they do need humanitarian worker, they do need supplies and instruments and medication to enter. But with having limited access, it's really challenging to perform our job as physicians and as humanitarians. The other challenges we have is the malnourishment. I mean, I do have a physician that's coming, and we're having, issue, like we're having difficulty bringing in simple formulas, So those are the things that we're facing to provide medical care for Gaza. And I'm not sure what else I can tell you. It's really, we really hope that we can have ceasefire. We really hope that we can open all the, crossing and have unlimited access to, medical supplies and instrument. So I do wish that, everybody can pray for us and hopefully we can get clearance. Oh, and one other thing I do want to mention, this is very important, that right now with the new rules, if you're Palestinian background, you're not allowed to enter. And that's one of the things that we've been challenging is a lot of our physicians, they don't have, even though they willing to go, they take time off, they are ready to go in to help, and then they get denied to enter from the beginning, from Amman, so to go to Gaza. So that's another challenge that we have. It's having access to the subspecialties that we need because they are being denied.
Thank you, Dr. Silvani. I know you have another call. You have to jump on to continue preparing for your upcoming mission. Dr. Silvani is a member of Doctors Against Genocide. She also has been working with Rahma worldwide. These missions are being organized by Rahma worldwide with full coordination and support from Doctors Against Genocide. So we really need donations and support for this mission to support Dr. Farashin and the doctors who are going with her on this mission. I know they are restricted of how much they can take, but they're still able to take some medication, some equipment. So please donate to Doctors Against Genocide and or Rahma worldwide. So the least that these doctors need to worry about is having enough money to buy whatever they can get from medications and supplies. So thank you, Dr. Farashin. Thank you for being here. And you can go on your other meeting.
Thank you so much.
Now I want to introduce a fellow brave American. She has been an inspiration for all of us in this past year of genocide. She's been a strong voice calling out the genocide and refusing to have her country, America, and as a true patriotic American, refusing to have her country being complicit and partner in a genocide. We have Josephine Gilbao. I'm sorry if I'm not saying your name right. She's a former 17-year Army veteran, former intelligence officer who worked for various intelligence agencies, holding the highest level security clearance, and a determined patriot for the American values and humanity. Welcome, Josephine. Please share with us your take on what's happening, and thank you for being brave and a true patriot American.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. First of all, I want to address anyone that's in Gaza right now and just know that you are in my thoughts and actions. Each action that I am taking is in support of you to end the atrocities that we are witnessing. What I wanted to do today is actually use my time to address the American people and the incoming to the politicians and incoming Trump administration. And before I do that, I want to lead with a scripture that resonates with me as a Christian, and especially as a mother of four. Faith without works is dead. And so as we think about that, and I read this statement to Americans and our politicians, I just want you to keep that in mind. Americans and citizens worldwide, it is with an urgent and heavy heart I am speaking as we bear witness to a humanitarian catastrophe of unspeakable proportions unfolding in Gaza. Over the past months, we have seen an escalation of violence that has led to the death of thousands of innocent civilians, men, women, children, whose only crime is that they are caught in a circle of conflict they cannot escape. This is not just a tragedy for Gaza, but for humanity. This is not about politics. This is not about Democrats or Republicans. You can see my sign here. From the left to the right, we must unite. This is not from the green to the independent. This is not about politics. This is about human dignity. We cannot allow this to happen. The world is asking us as Americans to do something, and we must answer. So Americans, please raise your voices, engage with your representatives, and demand that our government take immediate action. The time is now. You must go to their offices, email them, demand town halls, attend council meetings, go to Congress with Code Pink, organize your own group to go to Congress, demand to see your representatives, print off the amnesty report, print off the Save the Children report, print off decades of United Nations documentation showing violations against the Palestinians, and demand that your representatives read them. The people of Gaza are calling for us. The American people, we cannot fail them. To the politicians and incoming Trump administration, especially the Trump administration, as a former Republican and someone who supported Trump his last term, I am demanding that you listen to even the conservative Americans like myself who are calling for action. Israel is not an ally to the American people and values. We refuse as Americans, as Christians, as veterans, as citizens of the world to have an alliance with a country committing these atrocities. They have bribed and stolen money from the American people, leaving our country in the midst of an economic crisis with 44 million people living in poverty in America, 27 million without health care, veterans are homeless, and over 22 plus committing suicide every day, including my father, who was a veteran, who died by suicide, who I grew up watching struggle, fighting for health care from the veteran affairs and never getting it. Now, while you send these weapons to commit genocide, the American people are suffering more and more with no help in sight. The situation in Gaza is beyond urgent, and we need you to act now. The American people and the world are watching you fail, both our country and humanity, in every way. While you refuse to address the root cause of the conflict, which is Israeli settlement expansions, a blockade on Gaza, restriction of movement. I saw this woman and her toddler with a white flag getting sniped. I saw it with my own eyes. You can never take that memory away from me. This is what they are doing. The lack of political progress on a Palestinian statehood is duly noted. It is beyond time to give these people the dignity they deserve. As a 17-year veteran, looking back on my service, with the reality and truth, I find it ironic. We called our deployments Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. We were never there to free anyone. It was all perpetrated by Israel and the powers of the Zionist community that unfortunately extend into the governments of the United States of America. This truth will never, and I repeat, will never fit back into a box. The world has woken up to our hypocrisy. It will never go back into a box. So while we watch our administration right now cling with their claws to every legislation they can pass to try and stop us, it will not work. The economic effects of the unwavering support of a foreign nation committing genocide affects Americans with energy prices, trade disruptions, an increase in more foreign aid and defense spending, leaving programs like this past week, 9/11 survivors and first responders without health care. That national defense budget that just got passed gave Israel almost $1 billion in more money and resources and took away our 9/11 survivors and first responders health care. Totally missed by the mainstream media. And now I'm curious, what other programs did they cut to continue to send Israel money to commit a genocide? Dozens of nations are isolating our country and joining forces with other powers such as BRICS. With a recent announcement of 9 more countries joining BRICS this past week, This entity's GDP will, if not already, surpasses that of NATO, with more countries anticipated to join in the coming months. Why is this happening? Geopolitical instability of the United States of America. That is where we are. Geopolitical instability is pushing countries to align with other foreign powers because of the hypocrisy of our government to continue to directly fund and aid in the genocide. We have lost all credibility on the international stage. We are watching countries align themselves with BRICS. Any institutions created like the United Nations, International Criminal Courts, International Court of Justice are proving not to be sufficient enough to deter the extreme inhumane acts being committed by a country with money and power. What about national security risk? With already vulnerable infrastructure, we are opening the door to more cyber attacks for foreign countries who certainly have the capabilities to infiltrate and cause disruption. We know they have the capabilities. We know they are preparing to do this. This leads to more money going towards defense, cybersecurity, and less money going to the 44 million Americans living in poverty, or support the 22 plus veterans a day committing suicide. As Jill mentioned earlier, half our budget goes to the defense. If you don't believe us, usdeadclock.com. You can see for yourself, 600,000 Americans are homeless. A report in the past 24 hours stated an 18% increase in homelessness in 1 year. In 2003, it was 12%. Where are these people going to go? All for what? To fund genocide, to fund wars. The billionaires, like Joe mentioned earlier, this data is in the US debt clock as well. The comparison of money that is held by millionaires versus the average American citizen is an astonishing percentage difference. So what can we do as Americans, as veterans? We need leaders. We need leaders to organize in communities. We need to build groups that approach our representatives, that make it clear to our representatives what our demands are. We have to do this. We have to go to their offices, go to Congress, and confront them to their faces. What else can we do? We need community support for the people who are getting expelled from colleges. We need universities to step up and allow these college kids to go to their university or send their credit, any credits that they had at the university that they were expelled, to be accepted by a university that understands that they were just standing on the right side of history. We need an avenue for people who are losing their jobs and corporations to step up and say, we have this resource where you can try and find a job. We need this community support as leaders. We have to create this for the American citizens who will and are choosing to speak out against what's happening. So with that, I say, faith without works is dead. This is not going to happen with prayer. I call to my Christians, the ones that I talk to daily, my mother even. Faith without works is dead. We cannot just kneel down and pray that this will go away. We have to act. Our country is being under attack right now by foreign entities. As veterans, we swore an oath to protect our country from foreign and domestic. The domestic is here. The foreign is here. Now is the time to stand up. And priority number one is ending the genocide in Gaza, getting humanitarian aid and healthcare workers inside, and then steering our politicians to do the right thing. With that, I leave open any questions you guys may have.
Thank you, Josephine. Thank you for being with us. And I double down on what you said. Faith without works is dead. Amen. Thank you for being a true patriotic Americans. And hopefully we'll have more questions. We'll open the floor for questions and after a couple of more speakers. So thank you for being with us. Thank you for being patient. And Dr. Hawash, you take it next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Nidal. Thank you, Josephine. And I have to give Josephine a lot of credit because she did a lot of work on this webinar today. One thing that we will, as you all know, we're trying to secure a safe release for Dr. Abu Safiya and our colleagues who have been kidnapped and taken to detention camps. We are trying everything in our power. It is our duty and our responsibility to use every tool that we have and every connection that we have. And right now, I am appealing to Dr. Jeanette Nshewat, who is the Surgeon General nominee with the Trump administration. I appeal to her to hear our call. We would love to meet with her. We want her to help us secure a safe release for our colleagues. Anyone who hears this call and who can connect us with her, it would be much appreciated. We are trying our channels as well. I would like to invite Dr. Razan Nahas to the panel, please. Razan, Dr. Razan?
Hello, I'm here.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much for your patience. Thank you for being here. Razan is one of our very important members at Doctors Against Genocide. She is an emergency doctor in Washington, D.C. She just came back from Gaza after 5 weeks of volunteering on a mission there. She will give us some of her time describing the situation and how the hospitals are being targeted in Gaza. And please, Razan, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Karama. So yeah, to reiterate, I recently returned from volunteering at Aqsa Shahada Hospital in the central area in Deir al-Balah. I am just going to spend a few minutes just sharing some personal stories of what I experienced there that are in line with the targeting of the health system from my experience. Al-Aqsa Hospital currently is serving a population of 1.2 million people. It was meant to serve a population of 250,000. Every day was filled with cases of explosive injuries, quadcopter shootings, burns, and in line with what Dr. Perlmutter mentioned, about 80 to 90% of the patients in the mass casualty incidents were children. That doesn't include the medical cases that we were seeing that in any other situation would have been treatable, things like CHF, acute kidney injury, infections, but because people lacked access to routine medical care or medications, no access to clean water, nutrition, shelter, by the time they made it to the hospital, they were in incredibly bad shape and we lacked the resources to treat them. I was shocked by the number of young patients in acute renal failure requiring dialysis. You walk through a dialysis unit here and most of the patients are in their 50s, 60s, 70s. I walked through the dialysis unit, it was teens and 20s and it was shocking. And when I would try to ask and understand, there was no real explanation for why this was happening, but the assumption is just that due to the lack of clean water, proper nutrition, dehydration, that they're just seeing unprecedented numbers of renal failure in young populations. While I was in Gaza, the attacks on the hospitals in the north had already begun escalating. And it really struck me because the staff at Al-Aqsa, despite dealing with unimaginable trauma over the past year, they would be following the news in the north. A lot of them had family in the north, and they would talk about how horrible things were in the north and how they were terrified of what would come next to Aqsa Hospital. And I would hear this and I would just be in total shock. Like it was incomprehensible to me because what I was experiencing just felt like, how could it get worse than this? And the reality is that it is worse, but just being there and experiencing that, it was just so much to process. The campus of Al-Aqsa Hospital has itself has already been targeted 8 times. Just a few days before I arrived on October 14th, the Israeli forces bombed the grounds, and a fire spread through the tents where displaced people had been sheltering. I'm sure many of you saw the horrific photos and videos that came out from that incident. So when I arrived, I actually walked past that same area. I was just walking to go to another building, medical building, and it's on the campus. And it had just been a few days. So the entire area was still scorched and wrecked from the fire. You could even kind of still smell the soot. But despite that, there were still displaced families everywhere, sheltering in and around the hospital, just out of desperation, because even though the hospitals are being directly targeted and attacked, people still feel that they might be somewhat safer than anywhere else in Gaza. But the reality is that, you know, and we see this, that nowhere is safe in Gaza, especially hospitals. Another particular day, I had gone up to the ICU to meet with another doctor, and I couldn't find her on the unit. So there's a balcony just off the ICU, and sometimes they would take breaks on there. So I stepped out to look for her. And the second I stepped out, I saw a huge explosion just outside the building. That was the closest explosion that I experienced when I was there. And someone who was there just quickly like grabbed me and pulled me to run inside, because you never know if there's going to be another attack, if there's shrapnel, like what might come. I ran quickly to the ER to treat patients as they were just carrying them in one body at a time. And I didn't really experience the shock of what had happened until later. I didn't have time to sit and process that. But then I realized that the explosion was caused by an Apache helicopter strike, and it was a direct attack on a tent with hospital staff. And it was just a few feet from the hospital morgue where I went to often. You know, after an MCI, I would go just to, you know, pay my respects to the martyrs, which were mostly children. So I would go during the day, you know, in the evening, and this happened in the middle of the day. So it was kind of a shocking experience to have. After that, I actually went and kind of visited some of the patients that were in the hospital, and they just shared how scared they were when they felt and heard the explosion, and just imagine just lying sick in a hospital bed where you're already suffering, and then the very place that's meant to care for you and protect you is struck. I spent some time talking to Abdurrahim, a 21-year-old. He's been in the hospital since March. He shared the story of what happened to him, but basically he was shot by a sniper to his leg, then 9 shots to both of his legs from a tank, and then followed by a shot by a quadcopter to his arm. It's the whole story is it's a long story, so maybe I can share it at another time, but it's actually a miracle that he survived. His left leg is amputated up to his pelvis, and the right leg is paralyzed and non-functional. And he's been at the hospital so long that he's experienced so many of the direct attacks, and he'll just like feel the building shake, or he'll hear the explosion. And he was just telling me every time he's just convinced that that's it, that's his last day, like they're going to invade the hospital. And he's like, I can't run, I can't hide, I can't evacuate. If the hospital was invaded, that's it, you know, I'm done for. It was just very heartbreaking. Another moment that kind of stuck with me, I was walking in Deir al-Balah, nearby the hospital, and as I was walking, I just began to notice like medical supplies scattered all over the ground. And then the road just led up to a little mountain of rubble where a building used to stand. And among the rubble, just scattered everywhere, gloves, IV catheters, IV tubing, oxygen masks. Like I just sat there and just stared at I got really emotional because I saw a lot of like little baby, like non-rebreather masks. And I asked like, what was this? And it was basically a medical point that was attached to a school, and the school was a shelter specifically for the displaced families of wounded patients who needed medical care. And that entire area, the school, the medical point, had been decimated by an Israeli airstrike a few months prior. The obstruction of aid was also very evident. There was a scarcity of even the most basic supplies, including soap, gloves, suture, even like just paper to write medical orders on, you could not find. Like people would take a sheet of paper and cut it into little pieces of paper just to write orders. Limited number of ventilators. We would have to decide which patients' lives we would try to save versus who to let die. And even the ones that, you know, we would intubate with the hopes of recovery would often die days later from their injuries or from infection. There was not even a CT scanner at the hospital. The parts to fix the machine have been at the border for months, but they have not been allowed to enter by the Israeli forces. So there's a nearby like outpatient imaging center that we would transfer patients to just to get imaging and bring back, but you have to think about, is the patient stable enough for transport? Is the route stable? There was many times where, you know, it wasn't safe to send them because there was active strikes on the route to that facility. So I would say maybe max 20% of patients, if not less, that actually needed CT scans were getting the scans. And in many of these cases, the scan would determine, like, would this patient go to the OR or not? And so they would end up dying from injuries that could have potentially been treatable in surgery, but we couldn't because we don't have a functional CT scanner. In addition, something that kind of was so shocking to me was, I mean, I knew there was a scarcity of medications, but I was so often approached by people just asking me for Tylenol, like Tylenol, the most basic medication, just, you know, people with like real serious injuries just begging me for Tylenol because there was just no availability of medications. And Fedasheen had mentioned this, how they just limit what we can bring in. So each aid worker is only allowed to bring in one suitcase, and they limit the medical supplies they can bring. They limit the medications. Everything is supposed to only be for personal use. They've banned or turned people around for trying to bring in supplies to help people. And they make the process of entering excruciatingly challenging. I myself was scheduled for multiple mission trips that were canceled because COGAT, the part of the IOF entity that controls entry and exit, would not give approval. They limit the number of doctors that enter. The teams used to be much larger. Now it's usually just like 2-3 doctors entering at one time. I was one of 2 doctors that entered when I went. They've also banned people of Palestinian descent from entering. And it's all very intentional to discourage people from even going and helping. So the targeting, I mean, it's very evident, the targeting of hospitals, ambulances, healthcare workers is very intentional and systematic. The Israeli propaganda tries to portray the hospitals as housing militant groups to justify their attacks. And some people have already mentioned this, but to echo on their experiences, I can tell you from firsthand experience, I did not see any militants on or near the hospital grounds. I did not see anyone carrying arms. I saw displaced families with beautiful children running around in the courtyard. That is what I saw. That was my experience. I was there for 5 weeks. Hospitals are supposed to be sanctuaries of healing and hope, not places of fear and destruction. And it's very clear that these attacks are not random. It is not collateral damage. It's a direct attack on the people of Gaza's lifeline. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Razan. Alhamdulillah salamtek. This must have been a very difficult 5 weeks for you. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for bearing witness. Thank you for being there to comfort the children. A lot of the stories that you just said really very effective and very it's really sad that we have to go through life hearing these stories every single day for the past over 400 days. And we appreciate everyone here, and this is not going to be the only time that we meet. We need to start to continue this movement, make it bigger, make it larger, make it stronger, and do everything that we can to correct this course, the course of killing children, the course of bombarding hospitals is not something that we can stand by and do nothing about. I also wanted to point to the fact that we do actually have a campaign called Not Another Child, Not Another Hospital. It is a campaign joined by healthcare workers for Palestine, our colleagues who have several chapters all over the world and all over the country, who have been instrumental in holding press conferences, press releases, and spreading the petition around. We want to mobilize the medical community, everyone, every single one of us. We want to mobilize everyone and invite our institutions to join us in the call for ceasefire, to protect hospitals, to protect children, to put an arms embargo in Israel so that this genocide ends, and to give us spaces in our hospitals and our medical schools to speak up about what it means to have a community be exposed to genocide and how we can use our voices to advocate against it. We have our work cut up for us. We are not we basically day and night we're working in this. We appreciate the intersectionality. We appreciate the multidisciplinary nature of this meeting, and we will lean on every one of our speakers to continue this work together. I want to invite.
Can I say something before you move on, please, Karama?
Yes, yeah, please.
Yeah, I want to thank you, Razan, again. Thank you for your bravery. Thank you for being into Gaza. And I know it's been a very tough experience on you, and I know it gets to us going through this, seeing this firsthand. We cannot bear to see it on the cameras, so being there yourself and witnessing this must be too hard on you. We are here for you. And I want to also add that we at Doctors Against Genocide are launching a new campaign. It's called We Are Sick from Genocide. We are basically calling all healthcare workers in the nation and globally, and all our allies and supporters to take a sick day of leave, because we cannot bear this genocide any longer. And as doctors, as healthcare workers, we determined that the toll of the genocide on all of us is too much to bear, and we think there is medical and psychological grounds for us to start this call. So we are inviting all of you to join this call, Sickness from Genocide, starting January 6th and ongoing. We will be sharing with you more information and more details about this campaign, but we want to bring it up now, and we welcome not just all healthcare workers, but anyone, any American, any human being who have been subject to this live stream genocide for more than 450 days. We know we are all sick, both physically and mentally. We are literally sick. We cannot take it anymore. We appeal to politicians, we appeal to governments, to institutions. No one listened. No one did anything tangible to stop this mass slaughter. We, as normal human beings on the world, cannot take it any longer. Again, I know this is taking a long time, but Gaza deserves all our time, all our efforts. Thank you all for being with us. Dr. Hawash, if you want to introduce our next speaker, please.
Thank you, Nidal. So our next speaker is Dr. Mohammed Salame. Dr. Mohammed Salame is our colleague. He's a pediatric cardiologist. He is an activist as well, and he will share with us firsthand accounts of his knowledge of Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya, with whom he has worked for many years. Please, Mohammed, come join us.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for giving me this platform. Just to kind of introduce myself, my name is Mohammed Salame. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Texas Southwestern at the Pediatric Critical Care Medicine. Uh, have worked with Dr. Hussam online. I actually reached out to him through social media activists to find someone so I can help out with education, which is a passion of mine. And he and his team were very happy for me reaching out, and we started working on a curriculum for the fellows at the Pediatric Critical Care Medicine at Kamal Adwan Hospital. This was right after the first war in 2021. Unfortunately, this didn't continue because of this current war. We also worked together on some consults. He would call me for some critical care patients that require cardiac services that are not available in Gaza, as you all know. I have not enough words to describe this amazing human being. And it's very difficult to know that he is now abducted by the IOF. Um, Words will not describe how amazing he is, from his knowledge, from his humility, from his ability to manage and lead a division that was very small and grow it within a year to become a leading pediatric critical care unit in a city or a strip that was under siege for 17 years. Yet the other countries, other surrounding countries, do not have a pediatric critical care unit in an entire country that has all the support from foreign governments. So, and just a very quick reminder that actually Dr. Hussam did not choose to be a hero. He did not choose to be a hero. He was forced to be a hero. So let's just remember that those heroes that we are seeing, Dr. Hassan, Dr. Adnan Bush, all of them did not choose this. So they are not part of this war by choice. So let's just remember that and make sure that we all agree on that. One of our colleagues in Gaza also, Dr. Majid Awadallah, was supposed to join us today, but he's not able to because he doesn't have internet connection. I asked him to send me a voice message to basically give us some testimony about Dr. Hussam. Unfortunately, he was not able to send a voice message because he does not have enough internet to send voice messages that long. So he texted me, and I'm going to read what he texted me. This is the translation of his message. I will write to you quickly what I want and desire to convey to all those gathered in order for peace to prevail and the war with its woes to end. One of the chapters of which was the arrest and abdication of my colleague, Dr. Hussam. I worked with Dr. Hussam after I retired from my job. So Dr. Majid used to work with the Ministry of Health as a pediatric intensivist. He's very well trained. So he retired from his job, especially after 2019. He asked me to help develop the children's department at Kamal Adwan Hospital. The idea was born and grew quickly to become establishing a pediatric intensive care unit. The department was born within a year and developed and became competitive over the days and months. During this period and until the beginning of the war, I did not stop talking to Kamal Adwan Hospital because of Dr. Hussam at the end of as the head of the work, who loves the hospital. He would sleep and wake up hugging his mobile phone, talking in all directions to attract support and assistance for the hospital. With Dr. Hussam, ideas quickly turn into projects. With Dr. Hussam, the newborn department quickly turned into a young, competitive, developed department. With Dr. Hussam, the workers, doctors, and nurses were reassured about the safety of their location and work. I can say that I saw achievements that were not even dreams. Dr. Hussam continued until the last moment, asking for help, and calling for peace for the patients and the injured. The hospital specializes in childbirth and children, and these specialties are the foundation upon which the universe is based in survival and continuity. I wish Dr. Hussam's freedom, and I wish health workers, this is very important for all of us, please. I wish all healthcare workers a suitable work environment that ensures safe access to patients, hospitals, and various work sites. We hope that institutions, associations, and individuals extend a helping hand for those in need of healthcare. Just imagine a pregnant woman who cannot find a place to give birth, and imagine a child who needs warmth but cannot find it and dies of cold without healthcare. This is the end of his message. I've been taking notes while you are all talking. The meeting is amazing, and all the meetings are amazing. There's Dr. Norman Finkelstein is here, Dr. Jill Stein is here. Amazing panelists are here. I do have a comment, if you may. We don't have a strategy. We do have a strategy. We're not basically able to apply it. And whatever we are doing is very, very, very important. And I wish that none of us stops doing what we are doing. None of us. Just a reminder, water melts at 32 to 33. We're probably at 28, 29. Keep doing it. Please don't stop. I have written a lot of the words that you have talked about. I do have, a summary of the strategy that I have in mind. I don't think that it's the perfect strategy. I do think that it is the strategy somewhere that where we can start. I will share this with the Doctors Against Genocide leadership. But let me just go ahead and talk about what I think is important for us to do to have Dr. Hussam and the other doctors released to start with and stop the war on the hospitals. The first thing is pressuring governments. Dr. Jill Stein has already talked about that. I don't want to repeat everything because of in the interest of time. So lobbying needs money, calling representatives, media coverage, social media, petitions, you name it. The second point, work with other organizations. We just had someone from the UN give a speech now, and she shared some of the documents. We need to document the genocide, and basically this is beyond genocide now. It's actually a war against the humanity. We need testimonies to be actually given to those organizations. We need teaching and learning and sessions for doctors. We are not trained to do this. We're not expected to do this. We should be taking care of our patients. The third point is working with our hospitals, which I know Nidal and Karame actually went to Dearborn and they were about to get arrested. So we need to work with our organizations and hospitals. I can tell you now that I don't know if Dr. Farasheen is still online. I think she got off. She was trying to recruit me to go with them in January to help out. Everything was working fine until my hospital denied giving me this as an education vacation. They told me you need to use your PTO, which I don't have any because I just started working with this institution now. So we need to pressure our organizations. We need to work with those organizations, with these hospitals, maybe wearing shirts that talk about Gaza or something like that. And finally, maybe finding a way to strike. And I want to pause here and maybe get your thoughts about this. Last thing, and very, very important, scholarly activities that actually document every single detail of this war in a scientific way in scientific journals. Because if this is not documented, this war will be repeated over and over and over. Once it stops, it'll be repeated. And Palestinians are not going to be the only people who are suffering from this genocide. I'm going to stop here and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Muhammad, for sharing with us your views, your suggestions. They're all well taken, and yes, together we all should work on these and develop these ideas that you suggested. Many of them are, projects that we're already working on, and please join us and let's make this world a better place for the healthcare community and for humanity in general. Thank you for sharing your first hand experience with Dr. Absafia, how human this doctor was, how professional he was, and for speaking to his true character, this same character that has been assassinated by Israel in the last few days, claiming that this doctor was a terrorist or part of Hamas. And I think we all know that these are false accusations. We will talk about them in a few more minutes, but I want to introduce our last but not least speaker, our friend, Dr. Yiping Ji, Canadian doctor. I call him one of the medical heroes of our age. Dr. Yiping has been to Gaza, and he will be sharing his first account testimony of what he saw there. Dr. Yiping also has been punished by his hospital, and he was fired from his job for speaking out against the genocide. Dr. Yiping, thank you for being here.
Thank
Go
you for
ahead.
having me.
Thank you.
And yeah, it's good to be with other folks that continue to organize, continue to galvanize and mobilize other people to strengthen the base for a movement for collective liberation for all, including Palestinians. I want to start by just acknowledging I'm calling in from unceded, surrendered traditional Algonquin Anishinaabe territory, who are the traditional stewards of this land that I'm calling in from. And it's from that understanding of the genocide of Indigenous peoples on occupied Turtle Island, or so-called Canada, that I went into medicine to understand structural and also colonial determinants of health. And it's from that work in public health and understanding systems and how they affect people's health and experience of disease and illness that I stumbled upon Palestine, because of the issue of settler colonialism as a major determinant of health, affecting self-determination, liberation, affecting the ability to live a long, fulfilled, healthy life on occupied or in occupied Palestine. And I think there was a degree of naivety or innocence that I had in wanting to dismantle systems of oppression, including colonialism, patriarchy, capitalism, structural racism within medical institutions like the University of Ottawa's Faculty of Medicine, where I sat on their highest governing committee up until last year, where I sat on the board of directors for the Canadian Medical Association, the national organization in Canada representing physicians and medical learners. I climbed the ranks within these institutions as a medical learner, as a medical student, and later as a resident physician, and as a family doctor, thinking I could change these institutions from within. And then the Palestine exception showed its ugly face and had major repercussions for the ways in which I could continue to do anti-racism and anti-oppressive work within these institutions, being faced with a suspension that was later rescinded, and the university even went as far to ask for the university to give me an apology, which still has not happened, and had also led to my resignation from the Canadian Medical Association because of sustained bullying and intimidation, manifesting as anti-Palestinian racism, where as we all know, that for Palestinians and allies of Palestinians in their struggle for self-determination liberation, to do the bare minimum of speaking up to humanize Palestinians who face the rhetoric and politics of dehumanization. You are faced with defamatory remarks, you are delegitimized, and you are disproportionately punished by institutions. And it's not a mistake that this happens, right? It's by design. And understanding that these systems, major institutions, even medical institutions like hospitals, how their capitalist and colonial interests are just so clearly blown wide open because of what we're seeing in Palestine, what we're seeing in Gaza. The capitalists and colonial interests of these like institutions are so clearly linked with the genocidal colonial settler state of Israel because their interests are the same. In understanding colonialism for what it is, has always been a genocidal project in its foundations. And so when we can understand that, I guess we are closer to dismantling. But for me, I think that was a really important lesson that came around this time last year. Even though I did understand the ways in which Indigenous, First Nations, Métis, Inuit lives on occupied Turtle Island are dehumanized, and their struggle is often depoliticized. How that has also been as a result of Indigenous communities pushing for liberation through all the ways necessary to ensure that their stories, their narratives are on the public record, and that the crimes of genocide continue to be documented. I do want to share when I was in Gaza earlier this year, or before even entering Gaza, I was supposed to go to Al Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, and we were unable to because the hospital was surrounded by tanks and later besieged while we were in Rafah, providing primary care at one of the things that was mentioned earlier was a medical point that was at a school shelter. That was one of the places that I worked at the Dar al-Fazila medical point in central Rafah, which probably does not exist anymore. The other primary care clinic that I worked at was the Tulsatan Primary Care Clinic that I understand later in May when I was trying to re-enter became non-operational because of the siege on Rafah, and actually became a morgue to store the dead bodies from the multiple Al-Mawasi tent massacres. We heard earlier about the sniper gunshot wounds to the head and the chest of children. I remember bringing medications and supplies, many medications and supplies, and this was because we entered through the Rafah border in February, which no longer exists now. But we were able to bring medications and supplies, including some surgical equipment and wound care equipment, to the European Gaza Hospital in Khan Yunis. And when we did that, we visited the ICU and saw multiple patients who fit the exact kind of criteria that was already mentioned: gunshot wound injuries to the head and the chest. But working in the primary care clinics in central Rafah, I was not seeing these overt cases of genocidal colonial violence, but we have to understand that genocide happens in many different ways. The things that I was seeing in these primary care clinics were many, many, many cases of malnutrition and dehydration of young children, including children as young as 12 and 13 months of age that should have been walking but were not walking because of severe malnutrition. And I remember treating patients as old as 9, 10 years old who were previously walking, but were not walking because of severe malnutrition and dehydration. We saw multiple cases of suspected rickets disease, which is abnormal bone growth due to severe vitamin D deficiency due to malnutrition. In the case of over the course of just a single morning in the clinic at the school shelter, And this was in February, right? This is like almost a year ago at this point. And everything that was shared from the testimony of other doctors on this call about the hundreds, if not thousands, I think thousands of trucks lined up at the Rafah border, and these trucks were, you know, getting to the point where their medications and supplies were expired when they were at the beginning of when they reached the beginning of the line, and only to dump their expired supplies and medication at the border, not to even cross over the Rafah border. And so the ways in which genocide happens is manifold, and of course we have to pay attention to what is happening and always center the people of Gaza, the people of Palestine, as they experience this genocidal colonial violence on their bodies, on their territory, and all these different manifestations, including forced starvation, including the direct bombings and targeting of healthcare workers, where we know there are many cases of healthcare workers being targeted because they're wearing white scrubs or white coats, because they're wearing scrubs, and they're targeted and detained because they provide life and humanity in the face of genocidal colonial violence. And where there's hospitals, where there's clinics, that is where life persists and resists and remains. And this is what Israel continues to want to destroy very intentionally because of the machinery that is colonialism. And I think it's really important to everyone to remember that this colonial violence by Israel started in 1948, and it's been a 76-year-long genocidal campaign. I will end by sharing that I think to understand that this is the machinery that we're up against, it is also important to know how, as many of us, I think, on this call, where we are calling in from, we are calling in from the belly of the beast, of these colonial imperial nation states that were born out of genocide and have the same capitalist and colonial interests as Israel, and that is why they're doing what they're doing. And it's also not by mistake, it is by design that anti-Palestinian racism and the silencing and the suppression of healthcare workers, of many academics, of cultural workers, of journalists. Here in the West, we're seeing this because it is an apparatus, a digital tactic and tool of the colonial entity, like the colonial interest, to be able to allow genocide to happen. Like, we are seeing a case in example of how genocide is able to happen right before our eyes. I think that the action items that many people have already stated on this call is what we need to be leaning into. That we have to be able to make hope and joy radical. These are the moments in which we have to be creating and co-creating the life-affirming structures that are meant to bring collective liberation for all peoples, from our own neighborhoods to the rest of the world, and know how interconnected our struggles for freedom and liberation truly are. In knowing how our taxpayer money, and knowing how our pension funds, and knowing how our institutions, including academic institutions, are invested in war, in military, we have to be able to disentangle these things so that we can build a future that truly is hopeful for sustaining life for all peoples, especially and including Palestinians, because the ways in which I think a lot of these structural forms of oppression are so clearly linked and manifest themselves so clearly in Palestine, is I think this is why all of our attention needs to go to freeing the ways in which our companies, our workplaces, our academic institutions, our governments are fully complicit in Israel's crime of genocide. Because if we're not able to do this, then we truly are I believe that we are seeing the end of humanity in Gaza as we continue to see the continued sustained impunity that Israel enjoys. But I know that the people here on this call, the people of conscience, the healthcare workers of conscience that are listening in, we will refuse this. We will refuse Israel to maintain this impunity that it's enjoyed for 76 years, so that all of us can live in a world that is free from not only Zionism, but also capitalism and colonialism and imperialism. But this is where we are at. This is where we have to start. And I am humbled to be with all of you to be able to continue to do this in all the ways necessary.
Thank you, Dr. Yiping. Thank you for being with us. And yes, you said it. It's capitalism, imperialism, colonialism, genocide. It has been the genocide for more than a century inflicted on Palestine. That is the root of all of this. It's nothing new. And as you said, health is political, and we can never aspire to normal health and normal well-being for people who are being under oppression, colonialism, and have been genocided for more than a century. Thank you for being with us. I want to end this call by reminding all of us, talking about Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya, our colleague that we have been in direct contact with for the last few weeks. He has been appealing to the whole world to protect his hospital, his patients, his colleagues. He appealed to every direction that he could, and unfortunately, no one could help him or his colleagues or his hospital. We have testimony from his colleagues now how great this man was, and every time we interacted with him, all what he asked for is peace and end this war and protect the hospital, protect his patients. That is the only message that he kept repeating every time we interacted with him. We actually last had in-person interaction with him last week. He provided us with a video directed to the new Trump administration, appealing for them to protect his hospital, to protect him, and to demand peace, because as a true human being, as a healthcare worker, peace is the only demand we can all aspire for. We're going to show this video with you one more time. This is a video from Dr. Hussam Safiya last week, and unfortunately we haven't been able to get in hold of him since then, and we know that he's been subjected to torture as we speak. He might be in the SD Taman detention facility, the infamous facility where detainees have been raped, tortured to death, and we are really worried for the life and the safety of Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya. This is the man. Just listen to him. Listen to his message. He's just a doctor who wants peace. Go ahead, Maisa, please.
Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya, the director of Kamal Adwan Hospitals. I want to send a message to Mr. President Donald Trump. Mr. President Donald Trump, please help us at Kamal Adwan Hospital. We provide humanitarian service, and we are the only humanitarian hospitals in northern of Gaza. Every day we bomb it without any reason, and we are still providing our medical service. So I know that you are a person who loves democracy and that you are a fair man. So I ask you to protect us and to protect the health system. And I also ask you to provide everything that is required in providing the only health system in northern of Gaza. We love peace and hate wars, and I am confident that it will intervene until the war stops and peace prevails, because you are a man of peace. Thank you, Mr. President.
So we have a doctor here who said, we love peace, we hate wars. All what we're asking for is protect us. How can this be a general in Hamas? How can a man who is demanding peace be labeled a terrorist, while the government, the army, that is causing mass slaughter be the people on the right side of history? What is the definition of terrorism? If those who are asking and demanding peace are labeled terrorists, what can we call those who are insisting on war, destruction, and mass slaughter? What can we call them? Dr. Hussam Safiya has been the director of this hospital for almost a year now. Israel never mentioned that he's a terrorist or associated with Hamas. We know the AI system of Israel labels all those who have any relation with Hamas and automatically detonates drones to go and kill them and their families. If Dr. Abu Safiya was a terrorist and was a general in Hamas, why didn't their AI system murder him a long time ago? I know Israel will not be shy to do this if they really and truly believed he was a terrorist. So either their AI system is wrong and lying, or they are lying. Their story does not make sense. It does not add up. Why only now, after he has been illegally abducted and detained and being tortured, they bring up the issue of being part of Hamas and being a terrorist? We know this story unfolding. We saw it unfolding many times. Dr. Hamas Abu Safiya is a doctor, is a human being who has the right to serve his people, who has the right to be there with his patients, who has the right to refuse displacement or leaving his patients without any care. That is his only crime. He's not a terrorist. It is the government that is conducting and committing this genocide. Israel, that is a terrorist. It is the United States administration that is supporting this genocide and providing the money and the weapons and the political cover. Who are the terrorists? None of the people of Gaza is terrorist. Their only demand is freedom, lifting up of the siege, and for them to go back to their land. That is not a crime, and that is not the definition of terrorism. We refuse their character assassination of Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya and his colleagues and of any person in Gaza. We're going to end this. Dr. Karam Hawash is going to share a few things about our actions at DAG. Then we'll have a few questions. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. I know it took us a long time, but Dr. Hussam, his colleagues in Gaza deserve all our time, all our attention, all our efforts. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Nidal. So this is it was a very important message that you shared, and it's going to be almost a letdown to say what I'm about to say. But in order for us to keep doing our work, we need everyone's help. We need a constant presence on the Hill. So we want people to sign up to come with us for Days on the Hill. We have one on the 8th of January, and we will put a form to sign up. And this will hopefully not be focused on releasing Dr. Abu Safiya, since we hope that he will be released by that. But we need everybody to help us speak up for our people in Gaza. We are also having many initiatives that require funding. So please help us do our work by donating to us. We also have a calendar that is very unique and very painful to share, but it's also very beautiful. Maybe Maisa or Marie can share some of the images from the calendar while I'm talking about it. It is done by a Palestinian artist, and it is in honor of the heroic doctors from Gaza who lost their lives in the line of duty. The canvas behind me is one of the art pieces that is in this canvas. The art is also available for order from our website. This is extremely special. If you look at it, there is a lot of imagery and a lot of symbolism. The olive trees and the writing in Arabic and the writing in English says أطباء ضد الإبادة and Doctors Against Genocide. We would like people to buy the calendars and give them as gifts to their leaders in the hospitals or their colleagues. The calendar has many important events that happened over the past 1 year, poetry, stories about the people in Gaza, commemoration of their sacrifices and their heroism. And I do not want this to be a negative thing and say this is about what Israel is doing. It is about the heroism of the people of Gaza. And if you check out our website and go to the store, you will find the calendar and you will find the art pieces. Also, we also have our quotes. Our quotes are the Doctors Against Genocide quotes. We wear them when we go to the Hill for advocacy, and they are hand embroidered. They're embroidered, and they are available on our website for purchase as well. And we have a few questions that we will go through. We picked some. There are so many questions.
Just one more reminder, please. One
Yes.
more reminder before you go, please. And again, don't forget about Dr. Farasheen missions going to Gaza next month. She has 2 missions. We, Doctors Against Genocide, are working through Rahma to fund these missions. So please also don't forget to donate to Doctors Against Genocide and Rahma to help make these doctors not worry about money. Israel is already giving them enough hardship. Regardless, so at least let's make money not one of their concerns. So thank you all for supporting and for donating.
Great. So we can go to the questions, Nidal. Just a few questions for the sake of time, yeah?
Yes, go ahead.
So the first question is, where is it? There was a question about the International Committee of the Red Cross and what is their role in the advocacy against genocide. And I'm thinking that if any of the speakers want to answer this question, please do. Thinking that Dr. Mofo Kang can help us with this question if she's available. Dr. Mofo Kang? Maybe she's muted. You're muted too, Dr. Shbour.
Dr. Mofu King, are you still there?
Yes.
Oh.
Excuse me.
So,
Yes, I'm still here.
yes, Dr. Mofu King. So we have a question from the audience about what is the role of the Red Cross? Why they're not calling out this genocide? We know that they always talk about medical neutrality, but maybe this medical neutrality works in cases of war, equal war, but in terms of genocide, in terms of victims being just receiving bombs and bullets to their chest, to their children with no protection, no cover, do you think there is any place to claim medical neutrality in these situations? Is this something that we need to pressure the Red Cross to change policies when it comes to genocide versus regular acts of war? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll speak in more general terms because of the working methods available to me as the UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Health. I think it's proper to criticize all of the global medical professions and professional bodies specifically for their continued silence, which currently implies the same impunity and a willingness to witness and live through a genocide and not call out the member state of Israel concerned. Of course, the Red Cross is a non-profit organization with its own mandate and constitution that they have to, hold themselves accountable to. And this claim can be made by other professional bodies as well. And so I think it's important to continue to, firstly, call on our colleagues to show true global solidarity, but to also show solidarity to our other colleagues who are medical professionals and healthcare workers in the whole of the occupied Palestinian territory. It's not just a Red Cross issue. I haven't, of course, like I said, cannot speak directly on the Red Cross, but more broadly on health professional bodies, ethical bodies as well in the medical field and the medical fraternity for the continued silence. And I think that has been one of the most areas of disbelief, and how much the world and people who are meant to be professionals have managed to get themselves entangled. And I say it's self-imposed apathy, it's self-imposed silence, and it's easy to blame governments and other institutions when people have authority and have particular power to speak and to act. And when you fail to do that, it's too easy to blame governments. But I think it's important for us to continue to demand and to speak out and to call out, and in some instances, call in support of those who may not know how to actually act within how they are targeted and harassed within their own institutions for speaking out. So I think, yeah, it's a very hard time, and it's quite a telling time, and just completely, in disbelief at how many people have been unable to speak out against a literal genocide. That has really been the most jarring thing.
There's a comment from Josephine. The Red Cross has been banned from the Palestinian prisons since August. And we know that there is a very severe Palestinian prison crisis. There are over 10,000 Palestinians who are held on administrative detention without charges. We consider them hostages. We do not consider them prisoners. They are just being held as a way of inflicting pain and trauma on the population. And we feel it's part of the genocide, and as well as a part of the ethnic cleansing, because you make conditions of life impossible for a population, and that accelerates displacement. There is another question, is how can the public get involved with advocacy on the Hill and advocacy with Doctors Against Genocide as well? And we invite everyone to join us. We have many ways to get involved with us. If you go to our website and you sign up to join our coalition, you become one of us, and you start getting our newsletters, you get our invitation to our webinars and our Zoom meetings. We do have a weekly Zoom meeting as part of Not Another Child, Not Another Hospital campaign. We are also sick from genocide, and we are, as doctors, we are going to take time off for mental health, and that time we will use to heal ourselves by being active against genocide. The way to heal genocide is by actually forcing it to stop, and by advocating for an arms embargo. So join us. We have psychiatrists with us, primary care doctors who are willing to see people for mental health days and give sick leaves, because this is a true sickness. And
Yeah, Rama, can I add? I want to just emphasize your point one more time. Yes, we are all sick from genocide, and we know the only thing that will heal us is the end of genocide. So we, as healthcare workers, are calling for sickness from genocide time off starting January 6th. It is open-ended for now. We can add more structure to it in the coming few days. So please stay on the watch. And we need to use this time to end the genocide and mobilize to end the genocide. So please join us on January 8th on the Hill. The more doctors, the more healthcare workers who can join us, our voice will be more impactful. I want to extend this question to Medea and Josephine too. Medea, you have been...
Nidal, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you. We have the Deputy Minister of Health in Gaza in the audience, and he would like to speak.
Okay,
so
go ahead. Yes, sure.
If we can just bring him to the panel, that would be great. Hold on, I'm waiting. I'll bring him. You can keep talking so that there's no pause.
Okay.
Medea.
So, Medea, you've been active. You've been on the Hill for years and years, and we really appreciate all your strong effort there. Josephine, too. We have been with you, Medea, too. We tried ourselves. We tried. What is happening? We don't see we making any meaningful change. Is it that we are doing is not working, or are they doing this on purpose to frustrate us so we stop advocating? Do you have any other ideas that can be more impactful going forward, knowing that we as healthcare workers are going to be joining you in a more forceful way with more numbers? If you have any suggestions on how we can make our voices, our collective voices, you, us, and everyone else, for you and for Josephine to be more impactful and lead into a tangible change in policies, not just little change in rhetoric and smiles from the staffers.
Well, we haven't been doing this for a long time. I haven't been in Congress every day like this until after January 8th. And that's a very short time, especially when you compare it to AIPAC that's been in Congress and had people there for decades now. And also, the doctors coming in is very new. Josie coming in her uniform is very new, and that has had a big impact. The fact that there were 40% of the Democrats that voted in the Senate to restrict weapons to Israel is earth-shattering. You would never have seen that a year ago. If somebody told me that, I'd say not in a million years. So it is changing. Of course, it's way too slow for the people in Gaza, and it's way too slow for us, but it is having an impact. And so I'm very excited about seeing the doctors in there on January 8th. Just a group of people wearing those white coats and walking into those meetings is very, very important. And I would like to put out a possibility of having 1 or 2 doctors every week, whether it's a Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, just coming in for one day, getting people to make commitments to join us. And that day will focus on the healthcare issues. And we have to write our own bills, our own resolutions, our own letters. That's what AIPAC does. They write them and they find an advocate in Congress and they say, we want you to introduce this. We have to do the same thing, not just always be on the defense, trying to stop bad bills, but writing ones that we want, getting champions in Congress. And I actually think we can have a big impact, especially when there are going to be a lot more Democrats now willing to speak out.
Thank you, Medea. Josephine, do you want to add anything?
Yes. One thing I think it's so important that we have to say to ourselves and out loud is that what we're doing is working. Because sometimes we get so overwhelmed with wanting to see immediate results in what we're doing. We want to see the genocide end in what we're doing. And when it doesn't work, we tend to fall back and say, well, that didn't work, I'm going to stop. But that's what we're doing is creating ripples. I mentioned earlier, Nora Ericat, she made a speech in November 1st. I was camping with my kids in the middle of a forest, and for some reason, she was on my phone. And from there, it ignited me to move. And then all these other veterans that have become involved in this movement, that started with a ripple of Nora Ericat. The entire world knows about the Palestinian suffering now. The percentage of people that we are fighting against is much smaller than the amount of people that we have on our side. So my only suggestion is to not lose hope because we're not seeing results immediately. That's the biggest thing is we can't say it's not working. It is working. The reason why we have so much legislation being passed right now, the reason why AIPAC has spent millions and millions this past election season is because they have to, because they know that they are losing. So they have to tighten their grips. They have to take their claws and dig in because it is slipping out of their reach. It takes every single moment, every single voice to continue to advocate for what's happening. Because the minute they want us to give up, they want us to stop. We can't do that. It's not an option. So all I have to say is we have to manifest it's working. We have to find some ripple down the way that says, oh, this is working. I just went in my uniform screaming at these corrupt politicians, and now I have hundreds of veterans like, what can I do now? What can I do now? So you just never know when there's going to be a miracle that's going to change and make a bigger ripple. So my suggestion is just don't give up. Keep applying pressure. I say this, what rock have I not overturned? What words have I not said? So when I pray to my God, I ask those questions. What do you want me to do? How can I change this? What are you using my body and vessel and my experience to do to bring an end to the genocide? And we listen and then we act. And that's it.
What was the saying about the religion that you mentioned earlier? Not
Faith
working.
without works is dead.
Faith without works is dead. So this is a call
Absolutely.
for our colleagues, our healthcare workers. Faith without works is dead. We cannot just sit at home at our clinics and complain. It is time to move. It is time for all of us to go and join Medea and Josephine at the Hill and make our presence and our voices much, much stronger. If you care about humanity, if you care about the people in Gaza, if you care about your conscience, about your moral integrity, about the oath that you swore to protect life, then you should be there in DC on January 8th and join all of us. If they see 1,000 or 2,000 doctors, nurses, white coats, blue coats there, I am sure that will make a difference. So thank you, Josephine and Medea, for
Sorry, can I
inspiring
just
all
say
of
one
us.
more thing? Just
Yes,
just
go
because
ahead,
I
Josephine.
can't find Dr. Yusuf, the deputy
Yeah, I can't
from
find him
Gaza, I
either.
can't find him in the comments. So I just want to say out loud, if you are here, and maybe you can translate in case he doesn't understand English. If you are here, please raise your hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Josephine. So we have
I just
go
want
ahead,
to,
Karam.
there are a couple of questions. So there is a question about psychologists being part of Doctors Against Genocide. I want to clarify that we welcome every healthcare workers into Doctors Against Genocide. We do not have any restrictions. Even people who are not healthcare workers, who are concerned about health and who are anti-genocide, they are more than welcome to be part of us. And we will definitely include them. Go ahead, Nidal.
So while we're waiting for the doctor from Gaza to join, I want to ask Dr. Mofing one more question. When is the United Nations going to officially call this out a genocide? We know now that multiple reputable international and human rights organizations have called it and concluded with full evidence that this is a genocide. Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Doctors Without Borders. Dr. Mufo King, if you are here, when and what is the United Nations still waiting for? And even if they did not conclude 100% that this is genocide, we know that the Genocide Convention have the clause, and the ICC court and the Rome Statute have the statute of the responsibility to protect and to prevent genocide. Why didn't the United Nations officially declare this position? This is a genocide, at risk of genocide, and it should be called out officially and from the highest level. Dr. Mofing, please, if you have any input on this.
Yeah, thank you so much again. In my mandate as a special rapporteur on the right to health, I've actually written to the Secretary General of the United Nations, as well as the Human Rights Commissioner, and in fact, most recently to His Holiness Pope Francis, because of the absolute desperation that the world leaders, I believe, should be doing much more because of their convening power, because of their mandate to be very clear that this is indeed a genocide. When I did a press conference in Geneva last year already, there were already questions on why some of myself and my colleagues who are independent experts at the UN were so clear and so clear ahead of time and ahead of all the human rights institutions in calling what was happening a genocide, a clear genocide. And I think, one, it speaks to the fact that we are meant to be working as an early warning system as independent UN experts. And what's important is that the UN itself should be leading in firstly listening and heeding the calls for prevention, but also for immediate action. And in this case, I must say that I don't think there's anyone who is in any doubt or can even try to evade the fact that the United Nations has not done what we all thought it ought to have done by now. The fact that we are now more than 400 days of witnessing a genocide in real time, documented by its victims, and you have a Security Council that vetoes very important ceasefire resolutions is very problematic. And so, you know, even with the issue of starvation, a lot of the language being used was very passive. You know, we were always in perpetual risk of starvation or malnutrition or dehydration or perpetual risk of running out of medication. But it's almost as if those points have never been reached and have not actually resulted in catastrophic loss of life. And so I share in the absolute desperation and a sense that things don't move fast enough. And if the institutions that we have cannot even respond in a real-time genocide, what is it that we are creating as humanity, and what kind of systems do we need, and how do we come out of this and emerge out of this with some collective humanity to keep fighting for? Because I think part of the genocidal matrix is to dehumanize all of us, is to completely run us out of energy and completely, I think, at some point question whether we have legitimacy or even have a voice. And so on the one hand, I'm very critical of the very institution that I work very proximal to and support in terms of human rights. And on the one hand, very aware of how acute and desperate the situation is. And I concur with all of the colleagues that have spoken. Part of the colonial trauma and the imperialist violence is to disconnect us from our cultures, our religion, our health, our humanity. And part of that resistance is demanding the dignity of all people be preserved. And that is what I will keep fighting for. And it's the self-determination of the Palestinian people that must be protected and promoted. And of course, ultimately, I think the UN must, all the member states of the UN must recognize the self-determination, the dignity, and the sovereignty of the Palestinian people.
Thank you, Dr. Bofink.
I have a quick question, if I may, if that's okay.
Who's that?
Josephine, for the United Nations specifically, in the past few months, I've seen two really big press releases of envoys requesting to go inside of Gaza. One was the Palestinian Authority and the president of Palestine from the West Bank, and then more recently was an archbishop or a patriarch trying to enter into Gaza, both of which were denied. But the fact that it was denied really affected people emotionally and sort of another ripple of awakening. One thing I think that the United Nations has really been missing is making these press releases known, especially in Western media, of these potential envoys that you guys are requesting, whether it's an envoy with the Red Cross, who, as you know, is banned. Because we talk about the Red Cross, they are banned. Israel has banned them, and we all know this. But like the United Nations with maybe an ICC representative, with an ICJ representative, with a humanitarian, someone from the Save the Children, Human Rights Watch, an international lawyer, maybe even ambassadors. If we can have all these envoys, represented by all these international partners, making these constant requests to do welfare checks on the prisons, to go inside of Gaza, how many times can they deny it before the international and American people continue to say, wait a second, why do they continue to deny it? It just is another part of the puzzle piece that we can use to show that Israel is committing a genocide and they're hiding it.
Yeah, and I think it's important, Josephine, also to realize, before October the 7th, the genocidal matrix and the plan already existed. And my mandate on the right to health, including the one on Francesca Albanese, which I'm sure all of you know very well, and many others, have actually continuously requested access to the occupied Palestinian territory. And of course, our mandates overlap at some point because that's the nature of human rights. But, Israel has not, for example, even acknowledged receipt of my own urgent appeals on the fact that they need to stop arresting, intimidating, harassing, and killing healthcare workers. And I've communicated with them many times, even during COVID, making an appeal for equitable access to health facilities, goods, and vaccines at the time. So the
How do we
request
get that
access,
to a prep? How do we get your voice amplified? That's
we
the
need to,
question.
yeah, we need to share it more widely. And unfortunately, we know Western media is not covering even the recent attacks just of this past weekend. We have, other colleagues exposing the fact that they are deliberately not sharing that information and covering it in breaking news as they do with many other urgent and quite important news items. It still falls on all of us to find other ways of connecting, which this is an example of that, right? It is part of dissemination. And how do we do that? And for me, what I'm always aware of is how do we put less effort on the colleagues who are already doing this very hard work, who are already on the front line of responding. And of course, America is important in the discussion, but other African countries are important in this discussion. It's an African country who took Israel to the ICJ, right? So we have to think about what power looks like and how we shift power even within our own interactions. Because if we're going to just rely on traditional Western media, we've seen that they will continue to let us down. They will continue to dehumanize Palestinian lives. And so what other ways? I think for me, the question is, do we hold existing structures accountable, including the United Nations? And like I said, I have directly written to the Secretary General and to the Human Rights Commissioner, including the Pope, to say, come on, none of you can tell me that you cannot convene all of the world leaders and go to Gaza yourselves and demand that access. I mean, if we not even hearing that from those caliber of leaders, how do people such as individual UN experts then shake the system when the people who are having the authority, the mandate, the resources for immediate response are seemingly doing so, maybe quiet diplomacy, but that's not working. This time and space for quiet diplomacy just never existed in this current escalation of affairs. And so that's the frustration that many of us carry. And I think finding different ways of connecting, but demanding that we remain humanized ourselves as people who are doing this work, because it's going to take, unfortunately, as we have seen, too long, much too long. And we need to be able to do this work and build different blocks for accountability and justice. And so that's the difficult space. What does accountability and justice look like? Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Mofang. Thank you for being with us. We really appreciate your presence, and we cannot, as people of the world, as people of conscience, and as Palestinians too, be thankful enough to South Africa, the people of South Africa. We think South Africa is the moral compass of the world now. And we really appreciate all the efforts and all the risks that they've been taking so far to be on the right side of truth and to advocate for the victims. To build on what we mentioned earlier, as a medical community and the role of the medical community to combat genocide, we as Doctors Against Genocide, and after long consultation with legal scholars and genocide scholars, came up with a new definition for genocide from the medical standpoint, because we think that we as doctors, healthcare workers, our main role, our main mission is to protect the sanctity of life before it's lost, to protect human life before it's lost, not to wait years and years of evidence taking and legal deliberations to prove this a genocide or not, long after the victim have gone and after the damage has been done. So we as a medical community came up with a new definition for genocide that highlights impact versus intent. We don't really, as doctors, care too much about the intent. No intent in the world justifies for anyone to mass slaughter people whenever they feel there is a risk of mass slaughter or mass encroachment on human life. We as a medical community should call it out, and our definition weighs heavily on this, on prevention and on intervening and calling things out before the damage has been done, before lives have been lost. We would really appreciate your support on this. If you, in your position, can adopt our definition or work with us on refining it, that we as a medical community feel we have more authority and more humanity to protect human life than corrupt politicians and then lengthy legal proceedings. And we think that the world should adopt the medical definition of genocide going forward to call any risk to human life and mass murder early on and intervene early on to protect and to prevent the loss of life. If Dr. Mufoking, if you're still here, can you please support us in this endeavor of developing an official and a legally binding medical definition of genocide?
Indeed. And just to say that for the report of the Human Rights Council in June 2025 and the General Assembly in 2025 in October, I plan to do a report that specifically focuses on healthcare workers as human rights defenders in the same way that we understand the protection of journalists, the way in which freedom of speech and freedom of expression is protected. There's advocacy networks, there's communications and networks that support them, and different ways that the legal system and they have resources for urgent and immediate response when journalists do get, find themselves in some kind of conflict with the law. In this instance, we have healthcare workers who are directly being targeted by Israel. And so it's important for me as part of that accountability framework, that justice framework, that reparative justice framework, and what does global solidarity look like? And so I absolutely commit to undertaking that incredible task. And Medicide, as one of my colleagues who's an independent expert has also given us that word that didn't exist before this current escalation. So I think part of epistemic justice is to come up with new ways of framing and us taking back the voice and the story and who gets to tell that story. And I think that is something that I can avail myself to. And in fact, I will drop a link to the public call for contributions that people can email me if they do have some suggestions in the ways in which this should be framed, because I hope that this particular report can also go a long way, not just bearing witness, but also being used literally as evidence to some of the ways in which healthcare workers are important as protectors, but also for the realization of the right to health, and that their own human rights need to be protected and promoted first as humans to be able to do the incredible work that we all do and take an oath to do. So thank you very much. And I take that quite humbly. Thank you. I will share the details.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mofakeng. And just to your point about taking power from narrative, WHO has accepted readily that Palestinian doctors are not allowed on missions. And a lot of organizations have been repeating that, and we really did not accept that. And also, when the Jordanian doctor was arrested, a lot of organizations were just saying, oh, he did not follow the rules, without making clear that COGAT does not really follow the rules, and they have a very haphazard way of making things more difficult for Gaza. So thank you, everyone. I think we are at the end of this meeting. We appreciate everyone's patience. We hope that this was helpful and inspiring for us to keep going, to keep organizing, keep speaking, and not accepting the status quo. Genocide should never be a status quo, And we appreciate the multidisciplinary nature, and we will continue to work with all our speakers to bring our mission forward, which is ending genocide. Thank you, and take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And we're going to see you again next week. We have a weekly meeting, and thank you for being with us. If you have any suggestion, please share with us. And